You are listening to the free version of last month's Patreon Party People podcast. To get the newest, most current podcasts as soon as they go live, simply visit patreon.com/blazehedgehog and pledge $1 or more. Patreon donors also get custom RSS feeds to download the podcast straight into their favorite listening device. And Patreon isn't just for podcasts. There's a plethora of bonus content, including artwork, downloadable games, and secret videos that are only available to donors. Donating is also the best way to show your support for everything I do. If you've ever enjoyed my blog, thought my videos were cool, liked my games, or whatever else, consider donating something. Just go to patreon.com/blazehedgehog to learn more about the multiple different ways you can show your support. Once again, that is patreon.com/blazehedgehog. Hello and welcome to the Patreon Party People podcast for June 18th, 2019. I'm, of course, your host, Ryan Bloom, and folks, summer is upon us. It is currently 5 o'clock in the morning because any other time to record this during the day would have been way too hot. Despite being 5 o'clock in the morning, it still feels like it's probably about 70 degrees in my bedroom right now. I'm sweating a little bit. Hopefully the audio quality for this podcast won't sound too bad. I am running a fan in the background on its kind of lowest setting because I know it does actually pick up on the microphone, but I ran some tests with Audacity's noise reduction setting, and it actually doesn't sound too bad, like surprisingly so. But if my voice sounds a little warbly or you hear like something weird in the background, just know that's my fan running because I need to stay cool in order to record these podcasts. And cool means recording these in what could either be considered the dead of night, like the dead of night, or the very early morning where the weather is at its coolest. Technically, the news report I have here on my tablet says it is 60 degrees outside, but I can tell you definitively it does not feel like 60 degrees in my bedroom. But also my bedroom tends to be the hottest place in the house, it seems like. It's kind of weird that, I'll leave my bedroom and go into the living room or the kitchen or whatever for whatever reason, and it is genuinely like 10 degrees cooler outside than it is in here. I'm going to blame it on the PlayStation 4, technically, because I tend to run my PS4 all day long. It's kind of my YouTube machine, mostly. Obviously, I use it to play games. That's where I reviewed Team Sonic Racing. That's where I reviewed Sonic Mania Plus, things like that. But generally, when it is not playing video games, it is my YouTube machine. That is where I watch what amounts to television all day. And even when it's just playing YouTube, you can go around back to my desk here where the PS4 exhaust vents, push air out, and it'll be pretty warm back there. Like it is outputting quite a lot of heat. And, I do tend to, when I have like a canister of spray duster or whatever, I do get back there and I spray things out. So, I keep it nice and clean to where, maybe the PlayStation 4 won't overheat or whatever, including, maybe my computer won't overheat. And, it's just like that. People say the PlayStation 4 Pro runs hot. So, I'm willing to blame that for the reason why my bedroom is so warm, because I don't think my PC necessarily gets that warm. I know it can get warm. When I was living with my brother temporarily, before coming out here, before moving into this apartment, when we were, that temporary segment where we were moved out to Nevada, but we hadn't found a place to live, that span between, I think it was July and November of 2017, the brief window where my computer was working, I remember rendering out like a 4K video, my very first 4K video ever, of Sonic Adventure running in 4K using the NVIDIA Dynamic Scalar Resolution software thingy. And I remember as I was like rendering that video in Vegas, my bedroom there, that tiny little bedroom I was in, increased in temperature, at least 15 degrees. Like it was literally a furnace in that bedroom while I was rendering that video. So, I know the computer can output heat when it wants to, but it mostly seems to be when I'm rendering video, and I haven't really been rendering video as of late. We'll get into that in a minute. But, just general top of the show kind of things. It's just hot. It's only June and I'm already tired of this heat. I can't wait until, September. That's like 4 months away. Oh my gosh. Oh, and it's not even like the full-on super summer heat yet. We have been running the air conditioner more this year when necessary, because I think, everyone that lives here is getting tired of the warmth already. So, it's not too bad. It's just, it's in this weird no man's land right now where it's hot enough where I feel uncomfortable, but it's not hot enough to trigger the air conditioning to come on. So, you just got to put up with it. And I'm sure that, as things go, by September, it's going to be like, oh, it's only 70 degrees out. That's fairly cool. It's just, that's how it goes. You might notice that I sound maybe like in a little bit better mood. That's because I think I figured out why I've been such a bummer the last, 3 months, 2 months maybe. It's because I have homesickness. It finally dawned on me like a week and a half ago that I think it was the middle of April in 2017 where our first load of stuff went out on the moving truck. And then it was the middle of June that our second and final load went out on the moving truck. And my whole bad mood lately, just all this bummer, all these negative thoughts, I guess you'd call them, was just homesickness. And like the fun thing about that is, if you could, call this fun, is that once you identify something like that, it kind of, at least for me, it goes away because it's kind of like, oh, I know what that feeling is. I know how to deal with that feeling now. It's not just this sort of miasma or whatever you want to call it that's sort of hanging over your head and you don't know why it's there. And like, that's the kind of thing where it's like, when you don't know why it's there, it kind of just compounds upon itself. Because, I have anxiety problems. I think that's pretty much obvious. This thought of like, I don't know why this is happening just kind of, adds to itself. And it kind of gets worse and worse and worse. You get into, like, I've said this exact phrase for a while now. You kind of get into this cycle where it's just like, why? And it just gets worse and worse and worse. And then light bulb goes off, you snap your fingers and it's just like, wait a minute. I know what this is. I know why this is happening. And because I know what this feeling is, it can't hurt me anymore. And it doesn't. Like, maybe I'm like bottling it up. Maybe it'll all explode one day and I'll go crazy. And I don't know. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think I'm pretty in control of myself. Anyway, it's best not to dwell on that kind of stuff. It's just homesickness. That's all it is. I'm not a crazy person. I have depression, I have anxiety, but I'm getting over it. I'm getting better. The first step to recovery is admitting you have a problem. And sometimes finding that problem is the hardest thing you can do. So now that I know the problem, I can take steps to fix the problem. That's all it is. In terms of like creative stuff I've been doing this month, I was trying to hurry up and get a new album for my Bandcamp sorted out. I realized that it was May, and you kind of get, I don't know what the literary term for this, the grammatical term. It's like alliteration, I think. I think some people celebrate something called like Mega Man May or Mega May. I was trying to get a list, like a whole set of album songs. Yes, songs usually go in an album. Anyway, I was trying to get like a collection of songs together of all the Maverick themes from Mega Man X1. Because I realized that I was like more than halfway there with all the other ones I'd been doing over the last year. So I kind of made an effort to go through and finish up the ones that I was missing, which was Spark Mandrill, Sting Chameleon, and I feel like there was one more in there that I might have missed. But, I was just trying to finish those up before the end of May, and I didn't really get there for, a couple different reasons. Music, that kind of music production that I do is something that kind of comes and goes for me. Usually like confidence level, but also it's just, sometimes it's a very frustrating thing because I know how it sounds in my head, and getting it to sound the way that it sounds in my head is often, incredibly difficult, which is kind of like, the whole like artist creator struggle in general, because, that happens with drawings too. You'll picture a drawing in your head and then trying to replicate that with your actual hands and like a pencil ends up being incredibly frustrating. So that's just the long and short of it. I think I'm just about done. I think it was last night actually, that I was putting the finishing touches on every song in the album. So I was, getting it ready to post on Bandcamp. I kind of hope to have it up on Bandcamp before this podcast went out. Maybe by the time you listen to this, it'll be out. Maybe it'll be linked in the show notes. Right now, I'm mainly trying to figure out how to get album art, what I want the album art to be. Usually I try and stray away from using fan art or, copyrighted characters if I can help it. Anything to just try and stay on like the side of legality for this kind of stuff. So that's something that I need to figure out, what I'm going to use, what I'm going to call the album, things like that. But that is all, after I'm done with this podcast, as it turns out. Whoops, my screen turned off. I also plan on publishing the whole album on YouTube as one big giant video. I've been talking about maybe doing, more music videos as they were on YouTube. And I haven't really got around to setting that up yet. I haven't really got around to setting up a lot of things, as it turns out. But, that's neither here nor there. That's something that I definitely need to work on in the future, which is what I'm trying to get through here. Like I said, the whole thing, it's just going to be like the whole album is one video, because longer videos do better on YouTube. So, if everyone has to listen to all 8 songs as part of one album, then maybe that will do better than nothing, I guess. I don't know. It'll be an experiment. It'll be an experiment that we'll just have to see how it turns out. It'll probably turn out like most of my music videos on YouTube, which is to say, maybe it'll get 1,000 views and then that'll be it. But whatever. What else do I have written down here? Obviously, there's the Sonic 3, the definitive way to play Sonic 3 video. I finished up that script just about right before E3 hit. Obviously, once E3 hit, that was like a week and a half of my schedule that I needed to clear out to pay attention to news, do write-ups for TSSC News, that kind of stuff. But the script is basically done. I just need to write the Patreon stuff at the end of that video, and then I can record audio. I can do, start capturing footage, all that fun stuff. I don't think I need a shot list for this video. I've been going on and on about how it's going to be kind of longer than my Sonic R and Sonic Adventure videos. But that's just because of, all the extensive history of Sonic 3. This is probably going to be a 20-25 minute video. I think I've said that last month and maybe even the month before that. So, no need to beleaguer that point any further. I'm thinking my next video after that, unless I finally buckle down and, go from the notes phase to the actual script phase on the Sonic Forces video, it probably should be Shenmue. Well, I was going to say Shenmue 3, but I don't have necessarily a video planned for Shenmue 3. I mean, it kind of relates to Shenmue 3. Like that's, to rewind a bit, to, stop letting tangents run away with myself. Obviously, I mentioned, I think it was on my Tumblr blog not too long ago, that I had the scaffolding of a Shenmue video. It is probably about 75% written. It is mostly just, covering the origins of Shenmue, Shenmue 2, how they relate. It's kind of almost like a do-over of my Shenmue video review. I think I said this maybe either in the blog post or in a past podcast. It is more kind of like a redo of my original Shenmue video review, because that original video review is kind of thin on content. It's mostly just me re-explaining features that are already in the game and then kind of tacking on like a half-baked opinion at the end of the video. This will be a little bit more like almost a retrospective in a way, but also, just talking about the source of Shenmue's inspiration, I guess. So it should be, a little bit more informative, a little more contextually aware, let's say. That's a pretty big $5 phrase there. It should just be like an overall better video entirely. And I feel like I needed to get started on it sooner rather than later because I don't really pay very close attention to like release dates or anything like that. I'm not like the kind of person who memorizes release dates for all upcoming video games or anything like that. So I didn't actually realize how close Shenmue 3 was until it got delayed from August to November. So Shenmue 3 is pretty sort of almost kind of right around the corner. It was definitely more around the corner than it was, but it's still something that I should at least get on because, I don't think it's a stretch to say that I'm pretty slow when it comes to working on videos. A long video will take me 3 to 6 to 9 months to put together, depending on the size and complexity of that video. So, better to have it done early than to have it done late is probably the mantra I should be adopting here. After I'm done with this definitive way to play Sonic 3 video, I should probably move on to this Shenmue video. It just makes SEO sense. And if you don't know what SEO stands for, it is search engine optimization, which is kind of like a generic internet marketing term to mean that, when people are looking for information about a thing, they find your video or your blog or your whatever as part of the whole internet touchstone, I guess you'd say. So that is coming. A lot of things are coming. Oh boy. I am still super behind on everything. But we'll get caught up eventually someday soon, maybe, probably. We'll find out. It'll all work itself out. Something I am worried about, though. Another YouTube user, probably a little bit further up on the ladder than I am, this guy called Eyepatchwolf. He just put out a video like this week called The Tragedy of Shenmue. I haven't watched the video yet, and that's largely because I'm actually kind of worried that he's going to be making a lot of the same points that I do. And, I don't want to watch his video out of fear that I might subconsciously steal some of his ideas because that is something I've done on accident before. Again, I think I talked about this on a blog recently. It's hive mind mob mentality stuff where, you read someone else's review, then you write your own review, and subconsciously you borrow elements from their opinion. And I don't want to watch his video out of fear that it's going to influence my video and that he's going to touch on a lot of the same points that I do. Because just the title, The Tragedy of Shenmue, sounds a lot like what I was going to write down, or like what I already have written down that I was going to produce in this video. So I guess we'll find out how close I hit to his video. This is just me calling it out beforehand that, I wrote this video when Shenmue 1 and 2 came out. The remaster on HD consoles, what was it? It was probably like November or October of last year, I think it was. And I didn't finish the video then because I didn't own the remaster. The remaster is something that I've kind of kept my eye out to, maybe buy one day. And there's always this thought that I still have my Dreamcast. I'm staring at my PAL version of Shenmue 2 right now. It's right here on my desk. I'm looking at the case with my eyeballs. I could just capture footage from the original Dreamcast versions, but I feel like it would do better if I actually went through the trouble of capturing the HD remaster. Because again, it's kind of like revisiting that video review, right? You kind of want to freshen things up a little bit. So if you're using, 480p footage of a Dreamcast game, that works, but you could do better. And, I kind of want to do better. And fortunately, I actually have access to Shenmue 1 and 2, the remaster on PC right now, because, there's this whole big deal with E3. Microsoft has unveiled the PC version of Microsoft Game Pass, or I guess Xbox Game Pass is actually the title that it's called. And I think I might have mentioned this last month, but I got 6 months of free Game Pass access for doing a survey about a Gears of War esports tournament. And technically, that's Game Pass for the console. There's this whole big confusing thing where Game Pass for the PC is technically a separate thing, even though Game Pass for the console does have PC games included. But at the same time, Microsoft kind of realized maybe how confusing this is, and they've offered up this thing called Game Pass Ultimate. And for $1 to start with, you can have Game Pass for console, Game Pass for PC, and Xbox Live Gold for console. And it's just a $1 conversion, and it converts, whatever's on your account into this kind of universal, account thing. So I spent the $1. It gave me a month of Game Pass for PC for free, because it's through some other deal or something, I don't know. And, technically now I have Game Pass for console, Game Pass for PC, and Xbox Live Gold up until January 2020. So, I'm set on that front. All the Game Pass for PC games, I can play those, which actually does now include Shenmue 1 and 2. So, as far as getting this video done sooner rather than later, I do have literally 6 months until that runs out, but at the same time, I should just get it done sooner rather than later, because after January, I'm not going to have access to Shenmue 1 and 2 on PC anymore, which is a bummer in some regards, but at the same time, it's not really that big of a bummer because, again, I do have it on Dreamcast. So, just for purposes of this video, capturing footage of that HD remaster would be nice. So, again, just that's probably where I'm going after this Sonic 3 video comes out. Something else kind of big that I finally got around to doing was upgrading my PC a little bit. I don't know, gosh, it was a long time ago that I was complaining about this, but not only was I running out of hard drive space on my D drive, which is where all my Steam games live, where all my video capture lives, things like that. I was actually also starting to get weird hard drive problems. That Steam games drive, kind of always made funny noises and all this other stuff, and it was starting to give me, other random problems all of a sudden. So, at the time, I rushed out and I bought a hard drive, and I complained about the whole racket of the hard drive market right now. Western Digital is selling external hard drives, external USB hard drives, for cheaper than they are selling internal hard drives, even though these external USB hard drives are just internal hard drives with a special shell wrapped around them. And they very specifically have gone to great lengths to invent new technology to stop people from taking the internal hard drives out of the external shell. And it's just this big, huge nightmare where basically buying an internal hard drive is unnecessarily more expensive than it should be. That's the long and the short of it. But I still ended up finding a 4 terabyte drive on sale for about $100, which is more than I wanted to pay, but less than I could have paid. So, I did end up, through that deal, I got kind of a slower drive. I was worried about it. And that's kind of the driving reason why I never put it in, because I was worried that it was going to be, visibly worse than the current 2 terabyte hard drive I had. And as it turns out, that was completely false. It is the 2 terabyte drive I had in there was a Western Digital Black, I think it was, 2 terabytes, 7,800 RPM. And if you don't know what that means, that's basically the speed that the hard drive itself spins at. Obviously, the faster the RPM, the faster the data can be read from the hard drive, in theory. And the drive I replaced it with was a Western Digital Red, which is, supposed to be for home networking, media servers and things like that. Things where you stream video to a screen in your house or whatever, a Plex server, I guess you'd say, or, just stuff like that. Maybe you work at a media company, a video production company, and, you house all your video capture on one of these drives, that kind of thing. But being a Western Digital Red drive, it was only 5,400 RPM. So, we're talking a difference of probably 28%. I don't know. I did the math once to figure out what the difference was, and it was something like 28% or something like that. It was close. I don't remember the exact figure. Point is, the new hard drive is slower than the old hard drive, and I was really worried that, video capture would be slower, that games would load slower, things like that. And as it turns out, that doesn't really seem to be that big of a deal. I still can capture in almost 4K, where when it's possible, this hard drive, not this computer is, kind of getting up there in the years. I put most of it together about 3 years ago. So, it was like the upper range of mid-tier hardware then, and now it's kind of slipped down to more around actual mid-tier, maybe even getting a little bit low tier. The graphics card is, 1 generation old. The CPU was probably like a discount even in 2016 when I bought it. So, it's getting up there in the years, but it still can run most games fine. But as far as like capturing native video of games running in 4K, that can be kind of a problem. But, I did a quick test with, what was it? It was Sonic Generations running in 4K. And, there was a little bit of stutter here and there, but like nothing extreme, It was kind of like it was running on my old hard drive. Like it was recording on my old hard drive. It was normal, it wasn't really, nothing had changed. And part of that is because I also went through like this annoying process where I had like a computer, like a bug in Windows that was causing me to like leak memory. It's probably too complex to outline here on the podcast, given that, I feel like all this technology information just kind of goes over everyone's heads anyways. And you're probably out there, your eyes are glazed over at me talking about like RPM numbers and things like that. But, it was this thing where I would download data off the internet. It didn't matter if it was, Steam downloading it, if it was the Windows Store that was downloading it, or if I was just downloading it through Firefox. Anytime anything would download from anywhere for any reason, I would get this really terrible memory leak where slowly over time, Windows would just get slower and slower and slower, because this data wasn't being freed. And, people suggested moving my page file. They suggested all these like really complicated technical solutions. And what it ended up being in the end is when I rebuilt this computer in, what was it? It was April of 2018, I think it was. It really wasn't that long ago that I had to tear out the old motherboard and put a new one in. That new motherboard came with a piece of software called Killer Network. And what Killer Network does is it's supposed to monitor your network traffic and prioritize online multiplayer games so that, if like Windows has to update in the middle of you playing Overwatch or whatever, you'll still be able to play Overwatch smoothly while the Windows update, kind of downloads slower in the background. I'd had a friend complain about this Killer Network service before. He had it on his laptop and he said it gave him nothing but trouble. But for me, at the time, this Killer Network thing seemed to work just fine. It's a stretch to say that it worked just fine. I don't know if it was actually working at all, but it wasn't causing me any problems. That was the important thing. It was, it wasn't impacting my system in any meaningful way. When I realized that this memory leak problem in Windows, where, Windows was just getting slower and slower and slower the more data that was being downloaded through the internet, once I realized that it didn't matter what software was running when things were downloading, it kind of like became obvious that like I have a piece of software running in Windows that monitors and controls my internet traffic, that, monitors where downloads are coming from. That piece of software would be the likely cause of whatever is causing downloads to slow down Windows. So what I ended up doing was the very smart thing. I got rid of the Killer Network service. I killed the executable, I stopped the service, I disabled the service entirely so that it can't start up anymore, and that solved the problem. The memory leak went away. So, if you're out there and you have this Killer Network service thing running, just know that it is a piece of crap and that one day it will definitely turn on you. My friend warned me about it and I ignored him, until it eventually caused me endless troubles as well. So, if you're out there and you're running this Killer Network service and you think, oh, it's running fine for now, just know that there may be one day where it won't. Just keep that in mind, that it's kind of a piece of junk software. If you have it, I would get rid of it right now. But, solved that problem, put in the new hard drive. I also ended up, I don't know how many people remember this, but I think it was in like September or October of last year, right as summer was coming to an end. I bought a new CPU cooler that I never put in because it ended up being like one of the really complex ones. It was a Hyper 212X, I think it was. And it was really complex because, normally you're supposed to take out your entire motherboard to put this thing on because there are, special brackets that fit underneath the motherboard that are kind of hard to reach unless you sort of disconnect everything and take everything out of the computer. And I can do that. I'm no stranger to messing around in the internals of a computer, but at the same time, I also feel like I don't know enough. I'm kind of worried about my own skill, like I'm going to mess something up. So, those kind of like internal repairs for a computer or whatever, do like scare me a little bit. I'm always afraid that I'm going to break something. Even though, 9 times out of 10, everything's fine because, I know what I'm doing in there. But, I finally decided, okay, if I'm going to put this hard drive in, if I'm going to open everything up, if I'm going to deal with this, I should also probably put the new cooling fan in because it's been sitting in a box in my bedroom since, again, like September of last year, maybe October. And it went in, I don't want to say without a hitch because I did have problems putting it in. But mostly that was, the nature of putting together computer parts. Nobody ever writes like an instruction manual in English anymore, right? Because these are computer parts that get sold worldwide. So instead of, translating dialogue or instructions into, 40 different languages or whatever, they try and come up with this creative solution where they tell you what to do with pictographs, right? Like you're a caveman. They say, okay, here's a picture of this, here's a picture of this, here's where all the screws go. And sometimes it's not super clear what that means. And I ended up kind of putting the cooling fan in crooked at first because I didn't realize how it was supposed to be oriented inside my computer. But eventually I figured it out and everything went in just fine and nothing broke. And as far as I know, it's all working as intended. Again, this is one of those things where like, I'm going to make a recommendation here. If you have like stock computer parts inside your system, and if you don't know what stock computer parts mean, then disregard what I'm saying because this is probably going to be over your head. But normally like a CPU will come with a cooler when you buy it. And it's this little round thing, all these fins on it, with a fan blade on top. And normally, that's designed to be good enough cooling. It's not really designed to be, stellar cooling. It's just good enough to make the computer functional. This Hyper 212X cooler that I bought, I can't really look up the price right now, but it was like new CPU coolers, unless you're getting like crazy nitro cooling or water cooling or, like weird, super complex gamer systems. If all you're looking for is just like a really big fan to cool things off in there, one, you can get like surprisingly good results with just a cooling fan. You don't need water cooling unless you're this crazy overclocking kind of person. And two, really big cooling fans for your processor are very cheap. Like I was trying to say, I don't know the price of this Hyper 212X, but I do think that it was under $30. And I had one on my old computer, my old Windows XP computer back in 2015. And the difference between having like the stock included CPU cooler and having the HyperX cooler or whatever was orders of magnitude. I went from like my computer idling at like 60, 70, 100 degrees Celsius to idling at like 20 degrees Celsius. So, you do the math there, you go from 60 degrees Celsius to 20 degrees. The difference was just mind blowing for how cheap one of these, aftermarket coolers is. And cooler temperatures means software will run faster and more stable. I primarily wanted it for like video editing because like I said earlier, when rendering video, that processor heats up a lot. It turns your computer into a furnace. So the more cooling you have in there, the better. Because obviously, things get pretty warm in that computer in general. And, there's kind of a big deal is airflow inside of computer cases and things like that. So, the bigger and stronger and better cooling solutions you have, the more stability you will have with your computer. And obviously, I went to replace my CPU cooler because when I rebuilt everything, when I took the old fried motherboard out and I put the new fresh motherboard in, one of the pins that locks down on my cooling fan on my CPU was a little loose, and I knew from experience that could cause like excess heating inside the computer case. So that's why I bought the new cooling fan. But like even just in general, having bigger and better cooling fans as long as they can fit inside your case, because they can get pretty big. But definitely recommended on that front. And in the process of like all of this, of like putting in the new hard drive, figuring out this memory leak download bug, putting in the new CPU cooler, I also discovered that I've been underclocking my RAM for like 3 years. The RAM I bought, the 16 gigabytes of G-Skill Ripjaws RAM or whatever, DDR3, normally rated to run at like 2133 megahertz or like 2.1 gigahertz or whatever. And I was running it at half that. So, in some ways, this is almost like a new computer because I suddenly have all this hard drive space. The computer is running faster, smoother, and more stably, and my RAM is faster. It is double the speed that I've been running at for the last 3 years. And games are loading faster. Like I said, I can capture video just fine in 4K. I have all this space. I have space for days for video capture. I could capture the entire games of Shenmue 1 and Shenmue 2, start to finish in 1080p and probably still have hard drive space to spare. It feels like a brave new world for me right now. And that's pretty cool. It's nice being able to like not have to worry about video capture again. Because, I've been filling up this hard drive or the old hard drive for quite a while. And it's nice. It kind of breathes a little bit new life into the system. And I think now, once I figure out what I'm doing with the money I've been saving, we'll get to that later. I think the next thing that I need to think about here is maybe getting like an SSD, because I've heard people say that is like the number one essential upgrade for a computer at this point. Like it will basically turn this into like a brand new computer. Everything will just load way faster on an SSD, and I still don't have one. I'm a little bit worried to get an SSD because, I've heard that transferring an old install of Windows off of a platter hard drive onto an SSD can be a bit of a complicated thing. I wouldn't know. I know that there are like SSD enclosures that you can buy where I could, theoretically transfer the data off the platter onto the SSD through one of those. But again, that would be like $100 on an SSD plus 20 or 30 for the adapter. And that's just something I have to think about some other time. What else have I written down here? Going back to my music, if any of you out there live in the UK around a location called Lincoln, I don't know where that technically is. Some of my music might be playing on the radio out there. There is a radio program called The Cyber Den that contacted me a couple weeks ago, through my Bandcamp contact form, asking permission that, could they play my music on their radio program. Didn't say what songs, didn't say what date, didn't say anything of that sort. They just asked for permission if they could play my music, and they would link back to my Bandcamp. I said yes, and that was the only thing I ever heard from that person. So presumably my music is out there being played on some late night local radio program called The Cyber Den in Lincoln, Britain. I don't know why I almost said Lincoln, Nevada. I think there is a Lincoln, Nevada. But I think it was in the UK. Oh my gosh, I don't remember. I'd have to double check the email, but I'm pretty sure the respond address, where it came from, was a .co.uk address. I'm not sure, actually. Come to think of it. Anyway, maybe you know what the Cyber Den is. Maybe you don't. I don't. but I'm appreciative to have people appreciating what I'm doing. And it's a little bit weird, because obviously, I state in my Bandcamp right there that what I'm doing is kind of like covers of covers. I take someone else's MIDI, I run it through all these effects, maybe I'll add missing notes, maybe I'll, mess with the drums, I've been doing increasingly more production work on these things to where it's not just as simple as running a MIDI through FL Studio and it just pops out 10 minutes later. The songs I'm doing, are taking me hours and sometimes days or even weeks to put together at this point. That launch Octopus Mega Man X song that I did, that was 2, 3, 4 months of work while I was trying to get like this orchestra hit sound to sound right. They are turning into a lot of work, and it is work that I enjoy doing most of the time. But it's weird because, like I say, it's a cover of a cover. And normally in the past, when people have asked me permission, hey, can I use your music in my thing? Normally my answer is, well, yeah, but you kind of have to contact the original MIDI author. And usually, that's the end of that because, they never track down the original MIDI author or whatever. Even though, I do try and tag where all my MIDIs come from. This time around, since I say, straight up on my Bandcamp, hey, this is what I'm doing. I'm very clear about what I'm doing. And in every MP3 where I know the proper credits, I give the proper credits. I decided to just say okay this time. Hopefully that's not a bad thing. Because, again, I credit everyone that I know. I don't think the radio program will, but if people click through to my Bandcamp account, maybe they will, That's the hope. And it's the kind of thing where I think, I'm not 100% sure, but when you download music off of Bandcamp, all the information I input on a per song basis ends up in the ID3 tags. So I think the proper credits should be included with every song anyone downloads from my Bandcamp. That's the hope at any rate. I guess I do need to double check that and make sure that everything's kind of set up properly. But oh my gosh, if that's wrong, that's going to be me having to go through and fix 300 or 400 songs. So that's going to be fun. But again, just to tie this back, my music is on the radio out there somewhere, and that's pretty cool. It's also pretty cool for the MIDI authors that I originally borrowed from. But again, I don't know the time slots. I don't actually know where Lincoln is. I think it's in the UK, and I don't know what part of the UK it is. It's there. But try and look up the Cyber Den, I guess. I think I ended up finding their website once, and it was all these interviews with anime voice actors, and things like that, kind of nerdy stuff, which is, again, that's probably the proper demographic for the music that I do. That's certainly my demographic, I guess. But they hadn't updated since 2016 or whatever. So I don't know. That might not have been the same website that I found. Anyway, that's that. Finally, I'm thinking of maybe overhauling my Patreon a little bit. I know I touched on this a little bit last month, but I do feel like I need to start providing a little more value for you guys out there. Because, things have been slipping a lot. All my music went up on Bandcamp, so that's not really value for the Patreon anymore. I'm slowing way down on video production. That's not really value for the Patreon anymore. I haven't really been digging up old game projects like I have been. That was kind of what the Patreon launched on, was, going through all these really old game projects, and I haven't done that in ages. I'm not even sure if there is any more old game projects to go through at this point. There's also, what was it? I haven't had very many bloopers of note. Usually, there's bloopers on everything I do. Even this podcast, there are usually segments that I delete. Because, I'll either turn into a mush mouth or whatever. But, usually you want them to be funny or interesting or notable in some way. So, not all bloopers make it out to the blooper track. So, that's another thing that never really happens anymore. So I feel like I need some way to build towards a goal because, at this point, the only thing of interest for the Patreon donors is probably this podcast. And, I'm willing to bet more than half of the people that subscribe to me on Patreon, or donate, I should say, don't actually listen to the podcast. Because let's face it, it's pretty dry, right? I try and be interesting where possible, but I tend to ramble a lot. I drone on about, topics like computer hardware for a half an hour. It is what it is, I can't help but being who I am, as it turns out. But I need to figure out ways to provide more value to patrons. So particularly I'm thinking more about like the artwork commission tier, which I think is like $15 to request artwork and then $25 to get like a physical piece of artwork. And to date, nobody's ever done that before. I have had people in the past pay at that tier, and I'm very thankful that they've paid at that tier, but usually I'll send them a message through Patreon and they'll never respond to me. I'll say, what artwork do you want for this month? And I'll never get a response. So I was thinking of like revamping that tier to be like more of a general request tier, right? Instead of artwork, maybe people could request me to do videos about certain games, maybe do streams about certain games. I know like streaming was a goal that I set up a long time ago on the Patreon, like, weekly scheduled streams or whatever, that, has never been hit because I don't think anyone is really honestly that interested in listening to me stream, on a weekly basis, especially because like with the way my setup is now, I genuinely wanted to stream Sonic Unleashed to completion, and I've only ever streamed that game twice in 6 months. That's something that I want to do that my schedule feels like it doesn't really let me do, so to say. Because, I have babysitting and everything else to worry about. It just never feels like I can really sit down and make time to do a stream. So maybe, I'll keep that tier up there just in case. Cause, maybe if it becomes a job, maybe, I mean, I don't know. Who knows what the future holds? But, maybe people could push me more in the direction of doing things that they want if they donate more. It's kind of like my Tumblr blog situation, right? I think I'm probably a pretty good writer, as it turns out. I can write about what feels like almost anything. I will ramble for as long as you want me to ramble. But I only really do it when I get prompted to. I'm not just the kind of person that will go on, 3, 5, 10-page rants about something unprompted. People actually have to ask me for my opinion on things, and then usually, I'll summon something up to say. If I did that with videos, where people said, hey, can you tell me what you think about this video game in the format of a video? Then, maybe that would work out. But at the same time, it takes me a long time to put together videos sometimes. And I also feel like, I've seen that Patreon donation tier on other Patreons. I follow this guy on YouTube called Brick Road, who is, he doesn't have like tons of subscribers. He doesn't get tons of views on his videos, but he gets enough money on Patreon that he kind of can do this full time. And his Patreon, because he has a very similar tier for this kind of stuff, that tier is like $50. Because, if people request a game of him that he doesn't own, then obviously he has to buy it. And that $50 donation usually covers that, generally speaking. So, it's a thing like that where, I'd have to raise the price, but then at that point, $50 for, tying it to the artwork commissions probably wouldn't work out. I have to figure out how that pricing would look for it to be worthwhile for people to, spend money on it, and also for me to have enough money to play with that it would be worthwhile for me. So, figuring out pricing on something like that is something that I'm still looking at. If anyone out there listening to this has any suggestions on how much you think it would be worth for me to do this, I'd love to hear that, because obviously, I also want to price it in such a way that I am being compensated for the time that I am putting into it. If these videos take me a really long time to make, then, by the laws of business, that means this tier would have high value, let's say. This is all like nuts and bolts business stuff. This is how, if you've never like read any books on how to like price things that you make, usually you're supposed to, add up how many hours it takes you to put together something. And then from, you're supposed to like kind of make an hourly wage for yourself, essentially. So you think, okay, minimum wage is like $8 an hour. It took me, XYZ hours to make this thing. Therefore, it is worth end result. It's worth $200 or $50 or whatever. So, again, I need to figure that out. But again, like if we're talking, minimum wage, $8 an hour, and it takes me 3 months to put together a video, there is no way I'm having a Patreon tier that is like $700 for a video. That just doesn't happen. No one would pay that, I don't think. Maybe I'm crazy, maybe I'm not. I don't know. This is all still new to me, and I never really thought about it very hard, if you couldn't tell. So yeah, that's all confusing things that I have to figure out if I'm going to revamp the Patreon in the future, and I really should. So that's how that's going. That's where my head's at. And that's kind of the end of this whole, what's coming up, what I've done this month. That's the end of this segment. There's no Patreon donor questions this month. If you're out there listening to this and you donate to my Patreon, just send emails, send questions, send messages for me to read out loud on the air to reload. And if you're listening to this for free on YouTube, that email address was just censored for you, which means that you really should, consider throwing $1 at me on Patreon every month. And who knows, maybe in the future you'll throw more money at me on Patreon. We also have to figure out how all this ties into like game development stuff, right? Because, I'm making decent money on YouTube right now. Well, decent money is relative, let's say. It's decent money by my standards, but it is still nowhere near enough money for me to live off of on my own. But I'm making an okay amount of money on YouTube where I feel comfortable being able to save some of it up in order to buy, let's say, a Nintendo Switch, which I'm almost all the way saved up for at this point. I just need to know when Nintendo's going to announce their new hardware, if they announce their new hardware. Anyway,
shoot outside of the screen
is that email address for Patreon donors only. Send in your questions, send in your messages. I'll read them out on the air, talk about them a little bit, and everyone will have a good time. Speaking of good times, how's about we listen to some music for a minute, okay? And we're back. I'm skipping most of the E3 news this year. Oh, by the way, this is like, since we don't have Patreon donor questions this month, we're going back to having kind of like almost a news format. But we're skipping most of the E3 news this month. I almost said this year, but technically it's this year. But we're... Anyway, we're skipping most E3 news this month and this year because it bores me. I don't know. If you've read my Tumblr blog for any length of time, I don't really tend to get like super excited for games that are coming out. I get excited when they're in my hands, because, usually I can't afford to like buy new games or anything like that. Usually the reason I get new games is because I review them. That is usually like the criteria for, do I get a new game at launch? And if it's something I'm like being paid to review, then answer is yes. Otherwise, I tend to skip it because, I don't usually spend a lot of money on brand new video games. It is a lot cheaper and a lot easier to buy used or, well, I'd say pre-owned, but pre-owned is used. You know what I mean, right? And like discount games on Steam. Like I've talked about this before, I get like 200 games a year, like 200 new games a year. Most of those are freebies or under $10. That's just how it goes with Humble Bundles and, Epic's out there giving away games now. GOG is giving away games. Steam is giving away games. I have PlayStation Plus, so I get like 2 to 4 games a month there. Now I have Xbox Game Pass until January. So, that's like 200 games right there between console and PC. It is just absolutely crazy the number of games you get for so little money lately. It is just absolutely wild. But that's not entirely true of our streaming future, as it would turn out. That is something I'm definitely going to talk about right here, right now. In between the last 2 podcasts, the Google Stadia was more definitively outlined. It's going to launch this November. That is, if you don't know, that is Google's video game streaming device. When they originally unveiled it in, like April or maybe March? It was just a controller that would connect to a Chromecast or whatever. It was technically a controller that would connect to any device, they said. They said it would connect to your PC, it would connect to your tablet, your phone, your Chromecast, anything that is a Google-connected device, this Stadia controller would, quote-unquote, connect to and let you stream games and play games and whatever else. And now that the Stadia has been announced, that's not entirely true. The Stadia will retail, I think, for... I might get some of these details wrong because I didn't, write them down. I'm just reciting this off the top of my head. So, as always, double check the facts if you are unsure about what I'm saying. I think they announced it would retail for $170, which is right on the edge of maybe being a little too much for this sort of service. And it comes with the Google Stadia controller and a Chromecast Ultra, because for at least the rest of 2020, the only way to play Stadia is through a Chromecast Ultra, or if you own one of the brand new Google Pixel 3 phones, it'll work through that as well. But that's it. It doesn't work on your computer. It won't work on, tablets. It'll only work on specific Google branded phones for now and Chromecast Ultra. Maybe it'll work on like normal Chromecast. Google hasn't really said anything about that. But that is the long and short of it. Also, the short of it is for the rest of 2020, for the rest of 2019, I misspoke earlier, until 2020, some like undefined date in 2020, it will require a $10 a month subscription charge. And from the way things sound, this wasn't something that Google themselves confirmed, but it sort of came out of, I think, like a French leak, like 8 or 10 hours before the actual Stadia presentation. But the $10 a month thing will only like largely be for older games. It won't be for new releases. New releases on Google Stadia will have to be bought separately. And again, for the rest of 2019 to some nebulous undefined date in 2020, you have to have this subscription to play Stadia at all. I think it's called Stadia Pro. And this subscription will just be for older games, which is, probably the launch titles for Stadia, which is, what is it? It's like Doom 2016, Tomb Raider Definitive Edition, Assassin's Creed Odyssey, Watch Dogs 2, maybe Watch Dogs Legion, basically a bunch of Ubisoft games, a bunch of Square Enix games, some Bethesda games, maybe Skyrim Legendary Edition in there. I think Fallout 76 is in there. The stuff that isn't like Doom 2016 is pretty good, and Doom Eternal will probably be okay, but I don't know. And there's like a couple fighting games in there too, if I remember right. There's like Mortal Kombat 11 and Dragon Ball Xenoverse 2, I think. And Thumper too. So, like a rhythm game. Google's really kind of, trying to put it through its paces, I guess, and show that, here's how the lag feels in a rhythm game. Here's how the lag feels in a fighting game. Genres where lag like really, really matters. So it'll be actually sort of interesting to see how those sort out in the end, if they're actually as playable as I think Google is kind of pointing at the stands and declaring that they are. But again, have to buy a subscription, have to spend $170. Eventually, they say, like I said, sometime in 2020, it will eventually work to where you just need the controller, where you just, there will be a free plan where you don't have to pay this $10 a month. Eventually, it will sort of kind of work like a normal gaming console should in theory. Bandwidth requirements for the Stadia, it was, 10 gigs or 10 megabits per second, a minimum for, 720p streaming with mono audio, maybe stereo audio, I don't remember. It was, it was very basic. And then up to 35 megabits a second for 4K, HDR 5.1 surround sound. So, kind of a wide range of bandwidth, but nothing like... I say nothing super crazy because I lucked out, and even though we're paying for 80 megabits a second, we get 110 because we literally live right across the street from the ISP currently. Obviously, there are other places in America that really struggle probably to hit even 10 megabits a second. I know back when I lived in Colorado, we only got switched over to fiber purely by accident. Because our old landlines, underneath the street or whatever, had deteriorated so badly, we were paying for 10 megabits up until 2015 or 2014. And, we were routinely getting 1 and 2 megabits up until they, eventually forcefully had to put us over to fiber for thankfully no extra charge. But, then we ended up getting, I think, we topped out around 40 megabits back in Colorado before we moved. And then, like I said, out here, we're paying for at least 80 and we're getting 110. So, it depends on where you live. I know the big story, Google was trying to lay down fiber optic cable in Kentucky. And, things fell through, and now Kentucky doesn't get fiber because Google kind of messed up the job and backed out halfway through the deal. But, I think the primary thing, I actually should have looked this up. I think it was up to 1 terabyte of data every, what was it? Ooh, it was a month or something. It came out, I remember doing the math and it shook out to about 2 hours of play per day until you hit your 1 terabyte data cap a month, which is right on the edge of being reasonable, I think. And it's all super weird that they have this subscription service, but then they're going to make you pay for games. It's $170 for a streaming service where you ostensibly don't own anything. Nothing's stored on your hard drive. You're not getting a disc. You're just kind of streaming video from a server somewhere. And they think they can charge $170 a month for essentially licensing something to you that you should technically outright own. That's my whole big thing. I've kind of tried coining the term the war on ownership because of, there's this increasing amount of subscription services, right? You have Adobe Premium or whatever it is, where you pay them $10 a month and they give you access to Photoshop and Premiere and is it Final Cut that is Adobe? I don't remember. No, that's Apple, I think. That's something completely different. But anyway, it's this XSplit has, that's primarily a subscription-based service. You don't own XSplit. You don't own Photoshop anymore. You don't own Premiere anymore. More and more software. There was this, what was it called? There was a piece of software out there that let you save live streams to your hard drive. So, you could record Netflix shows, you could record Twitch TV streams, you could record Hulu and Amazon Prime and all that stuff. And it was Let's Watch On or something like that. I don't think they're around anymore, which is, ironic because they originally gave you a piece of software that you would download that would let you record these shows to your hard drive. And eventually they moved to a subscription model. And, now they're not around anymore. And now they don't have software anymore because it was all locked behind this subscription service. And that's a major problem, right? Eventually one day, people have complained about this before with Photoshop. When Adobe servers go down, Photoshop stops working. Premiere stops working. What are you going to do when that happens? I mean, that was the big argument people had when the original version of the Xbox One was announced to be always online with, no used games. Everything had to be licensed. What happens when that goes offline? And it's like everything about that, and even worse for the Stadia. Because, it's going to be this thing where, at least with the originally pitched version of the Xbox One, at the very least, it would require you to validate your games like once a week or so. I think it was like every 48 hours, maybe. So if the internet connection did go down, you at least had like this grace period before all your stuff had stopped working. With the Stadia, if like you're having connection troubles, like let's say it's a rainstorm outside and you're trying to play Assassin's Creed Odyssey on your Stadia, and, it's thunder and lightning, and you really shouldn't be playing video games during a storm anyway, but I think a lot of people do. I don't anymore ever since my computer exploded from a thunderstorm, but that is a digression. You're trying to play Google Stadia during a thunderstorm or during a snowstorm. Like, that's something I have experienced. That is something that is very safe to do, but at the same time, there's wind outside, snow is collecting on the power lines, on the cables, on the network cables, and it affects your internet performance. What's going to happen if you're snowed in and you're trying to play your Google Stadia and it doesn't work because suddenly you don't have the bandwidth for it? Because, the connection is suddenly super unstable because there's, 10 feet of snow outside. That's going to be a problem, isn't it? Because, you're not even going to get that grace period. It's just going to stop working entirely. You're not going to get a clean video stream. Maybe you'll get 720p at 30 frames per second or whatever they're promising. But it's still not going to work. And, very recently, we have this example with Telltale Games. They shut down. They are actually in the process of taking down their entire library off the internet. And not just like making it unavailable to purchase, but unavailable to download at all. Very recently, within the last 48 hours, news came up that, the Telltale Minecraft story mode video game, all 8 or 10 or 12 episodes or whatever they did of that series, disappeared off the Xbox storefront and then reappeared with each episode costing $100 each. And both Telltale and Microsoft put out a statement saying they did this to discourage new people from purchasing the game, but they want to leave it up so that people who bought the games can still download the episodes without it, just vanishing completely. Because once it vanishes, even if you own the digital versions of these Minecraft story mode episodes, you're never going to be able to download them ever again. They're just going to be gone. And now that's going to happen, if you think about it, 10 times worse with the Stadia. If a game like, let's say, PT on the PlayStation 4, if that was going to happen on the Stadia, it would just be gone forever. If you have it on the PlayStation 4, if you've already downloaded it, then you can keep it forever. There are ways to trick your router into letting you re-download it if you deleted it. There are still ways in 2019 to play PT, the Silent Hills teaser demo, if you really know how to get it done. And if PT was taken off Google Stadia, it would just be gone forever. It would never come back. And in the context of this, thinking about in terms of E3, this is actually coming up in other ways too. Microsoft obviously had their press conference, and, they were, with a press conference, they always hire, these fanboys, basically, to sit in the front row and sort of cheer for everything. So, the microphones pick it up, people can hear the crowd cheering, and, people watching the live streams at home get, super pumped because, there's all these people in the crowd cheering. They're like, yeah, Microsoft is the best! I love this company! And, Phil Spencer gets up on stage to talk about, here's everything we have lined up at our press conference tonight. We're going to catch up with Microsoft Game Studios, and we're going to find out what they're developing next. And, the crowd just goes wild. People are like, yeah, we're going to find out about new video games. And then he's like, we're going to find out about the next Xbox. We're going to find out about Project Scarlet. And the crowd goes, yeah, Project Scarlet. We're going to find out about the next Xbox. And he goes, and then we have a lot planned. We're going to find out about game streaming technology with xCloud. And the crowd goes silent. You can almost hear a pin drop. One guy way in the back goes, yay! And like, nobody that I know actually reported on that. Like, I ended up rewatching the conference again a second time when Giant Bomb did their commentary over it. And they were talking over it when that happened. And that's like I started laughing when I saw that because the people they paid to sit in the front row and be excited about Microsoft and Xbox games did not care enough to even fake excitement for Project xCloud game streaming. And, this ties into something else. Way back, an article I read a month or two ago where, Sony has been getting into PlayStation streaming with their PlayStation Now, PS Now. They kind of got into it way before everyone else. There was a series or a piece of software service way back like 2 or 3 or 4 years ago, led by, I think it was Dave Perry, the guy who used to, he was head of Shiny, I think, and he was responsible for like Earthworm Jim and Wild 9 and MDK and all those games. He started this game streaming service called Gaikai, Gaikai, Gaikai. And it was a competitor to OnLive. And, OnLive, I don't remember what happened to OnLive, but Gaikai got bought out by Sony. And they ended up getting turned into PlayStation Now, which is sort of like Sony's weird, half-baked effort to provide PlayStation 3 games on the PlayStation 4. And, you can also play PlayStation 3 games on your PC through PlayStation Now. It is just, it's a game streaming service. You're not actually natively playing PS3 games on your PS4. You're just streaming a PS3 game from a server to your console or your PC or whatever. And very recently, like within the last year, within, the summation of 2019, Sony added game downloads to PlayStation Now, making it, a little bit more like Xbox Game Pass, where instead of, just streaming video of games, now you also get like a selection of PlayStation 4 games that you download to your hard drive for a monthly fee. And the article was like, yeah, it's been really lucrative for Sony to add game downloads to PlayStation Now. Subscriptions are up 400%. And it's like, yeah, dude, nobody wants game streaming. Nobody is cheering for game streaming. It sounds like a nightmare. Of course, more people are going to be more interested in PlayStation Now when you provide traditional game downloads instead of it just being a crummy streaming service. Everyone is in a race to be the first one to have streaming games available, and it feels like the entire consumer base is recoiling in horror at every single possible opportunity. But it's not stopping, The train is still barreling forward. Our streaming future is still coming to pass, and it's not stopping. Nobody wants it, but everybody's going to get it whether they want it or not. And it just feels like this nightmare, how do we tell them no? And I don't think we can tell them no. I think they've invested all this money into this service where they hold all the cards, essentially. This is their big... It's... The relationship I always try and picture with this kind of stuff is the really old format wars of the VHS. It used to be, movie studios were terrified of VHS players, especially personal VHS recorders, because, all of a sudden, people didn't need to buy movies anymore. They could just record them off of TV. And there was this big, huge, long, drawn-out lawsuit where, Universal, Fox, and all these other, movie studios were trying to declare the VHS recorder illegal. And that didn't happen. The judge found that, people have ownership rights over that kind of stuff. They are allowed to record TV. They're allowed to keep archives of things that they want to watch later. And this feels kind of like the next evolution of that, really. studios, game developers, publishers, things like that, are trying to sell us a temporary license to something that they have full control to revoke at any point that they want. And, it's one of those things where they're kind of trying to cram it down our throats and hoping we'll just accept it. Thankfully, I don't know. Obviously, like, Google is all in on this with the Stadia, right? If streaming doesn't work, the Stadia is dead. It's not going to be here anymore. Which, is also something that people are worried about in general, even if it is kind of successful but not successful enough. Google, especially recently, kind of has this, trend of killing projects prematurely. There's a whole website out there called the Google Graveyard that lists just like hundreds of services that Google has like killed in the last 2 years, and it's just mind-boggling. You'd almost think that they were running out of money at the rate that they're trying to, cut old services off and sort of, streamline things instead of having a million different projects in a million different directions. So, if Stadia doesn't hit its numbers, 2 years from now, it's very likely that the Stadia itself will kind of cease to exist. And that's a worry in itself. But Phil Spencer was on Giant Bomb, and, Jeff Gerstmann rightfully asked him, during their late night interview segment, whether or not he sees an Xbox console after Project Scarlet. Is it just going to be streaming after that point, or are they going to make, new console hardware? And Phil did actually say that, Project Scarlet won't be the last Xbox hardware. At least that's their plan right now. So, streaming, I think they realize that people don't really want it, and they're hoping it'll be like this slow adoption anyway. Microsoft has notoriously done that anyway with Xbox Live Gold, right? Everyone laughed at the idea of Xbox Live Gold. Nobody will pay for multiplayer access. Multiplayer access is free on the PC. Why would anyone do it on the console? Well, that's because there's no choice on the console. You either pay for Xbox Live Gold or you don't play online, And when it came to like Halo 2, Counter-Strike was a big Xbox Live Gold game. When it came to playing these games online on a console, you had to pay or you didn't play. That's kind of catchy, really. Anyway, it's just, they probably hope that it'll have this kind of adoption rate, sort of like Xbox Live Gold, where, if it's just around enough, if they find the killer app, then it will stick. And, I definitely think that's something Google is hoping for, because they are, this isn't just a game streaming service to them. This is like cloud computing. They're saying that games will always look best and play best on Stadia. Ignoring the fact that, you'll have to deal with compression artifacts and everything like that. But, they're saying that they are developing Stadia exclusive games that will do things that an Xbox or a PlayStation or a Switch can't do, things that take advantage of this cloud computing system to really push the limits of what's possible, with like physics simulation, AI simulation, picture-in-a-picture video windows, things like that. Which would be cool if they could pull it off, maybe, but I don't know that the risks are worth taking, That is a very sort of dangerous road to go down. Again, it's kind of like with Xbox Live Gold, you let that stuff get entrenched, and that's kind of the end of the world in a sense. And, thankfully now it's taken them like 15 years at this point, but I think they finally have found like a feature set that works for Xbox Live Gold. I mean, you're talking to me, this person who's actually in his second year of PlayStation Plus currently, and I was like, staunchly against Xbox Live Gold, and still am in a sense, but, you're at least getting, it's like a subscription service where you get free games, and, if you weigh the cost analysis or whatever, the amount you get for Xbox Live Gold, the amount you used to get for PlayStation Plus, not so much anymore now that they stopped providing Vita and PS3 games, but, the value you get for having this subscription service that delivers, 2, 3, 4 free games a month, on top of multiplayer, on top of, whatever else weird garbage they're selling you with it now, like cloud saves or, automatic trophy syncing or whatever weird junk Sony came up with. it does kind of start to feel valuable in a sense, where, previously, even just 5 years ago, it did not. So, it is kind of working out. But again, it took them like at least 15 years to get there, probably more. I mean, if you think about the Xbox came out in 2001, I think Halo 2 was a 2003 game. It is 2019, so that is what, 16 or 17 years? It was a long time before that really started to feel like something anyone would be willing to pay for. And, I honestly don't blame you if you still can't like actually justify, buying into this weird pyramid scheme, or it's not a pyramid scheme, but you know what I mean? This weird sort of thing that I would still kind of call a scam in some ways. Again, it's, you're paying for a subscription for games, paying for Xbox Game Pass or whatever it is. It's almost kind of like almost indoctrination into this idea that games are a subscription and not something that you own. And, that ties into a whole different tangent. Ross Scott is doing this thing where he's trying to get to the bottom of the term games as a service. I'll link his YouTube video in the video or in the podcast show notes. It's basically the idea, it's a long concept. It's kind of a dry video by his own admission, but he's trying to figure out if the whole term of games as a service is a lie or not. If games can actually be a service, what they have to do to be defined as a service, and whether or not being a service is violating your ownership rights based on, how you access those games. Because, like servers shut down or whatever, and you straight up like lose access to some games, entire games. Like, you can't play Darkspore anymore. You can't play Need for Speed Online anymore. You can't play a lot of different MMOs anymore because they require, online connections. And, it's just, video games are changing under our noses in ways that are subtle and not so subtle. And it's not great, folks. Not to get all like tinfoil hat on you here, but, there's some real backdoor underhanded business that could be going on behind the scenes here. And it's a nasty thing if you think about it too hard. I also have written in here notes that at E3 this year, Ubisoft announced their own subscription service exclusively for Ubisoft games called Uplay Plus. And, I openly laughed out loud when I read that, because who is going to pay exclusively for Ubisoft games? And I think they want to charge like $15 a month for Ubisoft's entire catalog of games they've ever released. And I don't know if this was true or not, but it almost sounded like it was exclusive to Stadia. So on top of paying the $9.99 a month for Stadia Pro, you'd also pay $15.99 or $14.99 a month for Uplay Plus. So, you'd be paying almost $25 a month for garbage, essentially, for just total junk. I mean, it's probably not Stadia exclusive, but, it's just, what a ridiculous thing. I had to rack my mind to even think about whether or not Ubisoft has even released 100 games. And, I guess technically if you dig back through Ubisoft's entire catalog since 1987 or whatever, when they published the very first Zombie for the MS Spectrum or ZX Spectrum or whatever, all the way back in 87 or 83 or whatever, just, way, way, way back at the very inception point of home console video games. It probably would be 200, 300 games at that point. Especially, modern Ubisoft since the Xbox 360 era, you're talking probably 10 Assassin's Creed games. You're probably talking 5 Rayman games, 5 Rabbids games already right there. That's 20, 25 games right there, And then you start piling in Splinter Cell and The Division and Ghost Recon and, Beyond Good and Evil HD, The Crew, what else? For Honor, that's probably inching up on around 50 games right there. So, if they start including PlayStation 2, GameCube, Xbox, Prince of Persia, there's 4 or 5 games in there. It depends on if they start also including like portable games. I know there was like some Game Boy Advance exclusive Prince of Persia games in there. Prince of Persia Classic on Xbox Live Arcade. Prince of Persia Tactics on the DS. Was it even Prince of Persia Tactics? It was like Prince of Persia 4 Kingdoms or something. I don't know. That's probably pushing like 60 or 70 games. But $15 a month. You'd have to be an idiot to pay for that. Ubisoft isn't that great, and it feels like they have this really high opinion of their catalog that, at least personally speaking, I do not. I like Sands of Time, I love Rayman 2, but I think that's like the beginning and the end of my Ubisoft love, is those 2 games. I'm kind of okay with Rayman Legends. I guess they own Trackmania now. Still, $15 a month, though? Like, 90% of the games in that catalog, you probably got in a Humble Bundle for $1, right? Heck, there was even that, like, last Christmas where Ubisoft was giving away, like, 10 or 15 games, like, this dumb advent calendar thing. That's where I ended up with, like, The Crew and Rayman Origins and, whatever else. It's just, oh... And like you think about it, Ubisoft was also the first one to kind of create like a big major name Steam competitor. That's what the original Uplay was. It was their answer to Steam, and they were kind of the first people to do it. And then, after that we got EA Origin, and we got the Bethesda launcher, the Epic launcher, Battle.net, the launcher. Oh, Ubisoft. You are a terrible company. You make okay games sometimes. Like Watch Dogs 2 is probably okay. The Division is probably okay. People like Rainbow Six Siege, I guess. Yeah, but who cares? Like, I feel like there is absolutely nothing special about Ubisoft these days, outside of the fact that they like find new ways to be annoying and weird, right? $15 a month, man. Whew, no thank you. Especially, what if it like even turns into like what if it turns into a streaming service? If it's going to be on Google Stadia, that it is. Ugh. At least that does probably confirm that there will be 100 Ubisoft games on Google Stadia, right? What a nightmare. Anyway, that's the end of this segment. You can take your tinfoil hats off now, folks. When we come back, video games I've been playing, I guess. See you then. And now on to the final segment where I just kind of, rap about all the stuff I've played and ingested entertainment-wise every month. Just last night I saw Ralph Breaks the Internet, the sequel to Wreck-It Ralph. Wreck-It Ralph was like what? Figure a 2010 movie and it is 2019? I don't actually remember. I mean, if you figure Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing was 2009, I think, and that had Banjo-Kazooie in it. The sequel had to be... Well, it was after Sonic Generations, I think. I mean, yeah, no, it had to be after Sonic Generations, because Sonic and All-Stars Racing Transformed had Sky Sanctuary in it, and that was the Sonic Generations version. So Sonic Generations was 2011? Yeah, because I think Sonic Colors was 2010, so Sonic Generations was 2011. It sounds right in my brain that Sonic and All-Stars Racing Transformed was 2012. So 2012 to 2019 is an amount of time that I cannot do math for in my head. It's probably like 7 years. So, it's been a while since a Wreck-It Ralph movie. Ralph Breaks the Internet came out last year. I don't, in retrospect, I don't know that Wreck-It Ralph was like a super great movie. It wasn't terrible by any stretch of the imagination. It's one of those movies that I think ages better in your memory than you actually thought while watching it. But Ralph Breaks the Internet wasn't what I would consider a stellar movie. I didn't hate it. It was not a terrible movie, but I'll link, I wrote, I think I've said this before, but when I watch, I bumped my wall here. When I watch movies lately, I try and make an effort to write down a really short, user review on IMDb. So I'll link to my Ralph Breaks the Internet IMDb review in the podcast show notes. But I don't know, it felt like a movie that was more there to just show you, hey, here's the Amazon logo, here's the Google logo, here's the YouTube logo, here's Facebook, here's Pinterest, here's Twitter. Look at all these blue birds. They're tweeting things. And here, look, viral information is spreading throughout Twitter. Look at all these birds retweeting each other. Oh, isn't that clever? Aren't we clever? And it was like a bummer in that regard, because it was just, look at all the references we can make. Months ago, I heard someone call it Disney's version of the Emoji Movie. And I guess, I've technically never seen the Emoji Movie, but presumably that is also full of just insufferable, endless internet references, to internet brands, as it were. And, that's definitely what Ralph Breaks the Internet was. Thankfully, once you kind of get past that, it's not the worst movie in the world. That once you actually get down into the plot, and really think about it kind of hard, it's not terrible. It just takes a really long time to get there, because it is so busy kind of trying to be almost, I was going to say it was trying to be the video game version of Who Framed Roger Rabbit, but that was more the original Wreck-It Ralph, where you had, cameos by Sonic and Bowser and Diablo and Zangief from Street Fighter 2. A lot of those guys returned for Ralph Breaks the Internet, but there aren't really any new video game characters. And in fact, one of the things that I was really looking for in Ralph Breaks the Internet, because I thought it was kind of interesting that it was in Wreck-It Ralph. In the original Wreck-It Ralph, there's a Sonic the Fighters arcade cabinet in the arcade that Wreck-It Ralph takes place in, which is kind of a rare sight to see, especially now. That game wasn't super successful, I don't think. In fact, there was actually a minor outcry when it first came out, because it was a Sonic the Hedgehog fighting game, and parental groups were oh, Sonic shouldn't be punching his friends. That's teaching kids to be violent. Because, this was at the tail end of the whole Mortal Kombat controversy, right? So, it was this kind of thing, Sonic the Fighters, Sonic Championship, as it were. That was its North American name. Everyone just calls it Sonic the Fighters now. I don't really understand. It had a localized American name that was Sonic Championship. I mean, I guess Sonic the Fighters sounds kind of cooler in that sort of weird Japanese way. So, I'm not going to argue about it too loudly, but still, anyway, point is, there was a Sonic Championship cabinet in Wreck-It Ralph, and that cabinet's not there anymore in Ralph Breaks the Internet. Now, they do have a few iconic cabinets every now and then. I think I spotted a House of the Dead cabinet, even though there are, logically no zombies in this movie. But, it's all the returning roles from Wreck-It Ralph. It's, Zangief, you see a little bit of Chun-Li, Q*bert, Diablo is there, obviously. Sonic turns up. Apparently, the credits listed that Dr. Eggman was in this movie, and I didn't see, he's way far in the background in some scene that I missed, because, I wasn't really paying super close attention to background details. That's kind of a second or third time viewing sort of thing. But, I didn't see him. Bowser wasn't in this movie. He was in the first movie, I think, because I seem to remember people saying that there was a deal where they wanted Mario to be in Wreck-It Ralph, and instead they got Bowser. And there's no Bowser in this movie. I think I don't remember. I watched the credits all the way to the end, and I don't think Nintendo was credited for anything in this. But anyway, it's a lot less about video games, as it were. I mean, it kind of still is, but it kind of isn't. It's more just about, hey, look, here's all these Disney references, because they go to the Oh My Disney website, a website I've never actually heard of until now. There's stormtroopers and there's Disney princesses, and there's like an interview section with Groot, and they do the I am Groot joke again for like a third movie. Or, well, technically, gosh, Groot's in what? Guardians of Galaxy 1, 2, he's in Infinity War, he's in Endgame. So that's like, this would be the fifth movie that they lean on the I am Groot joke. I mean, it's a good joke. And they probably brought Vin Diesel back just for that role, because they brought all the Disney princesses back for this movie. Like, again, this movie just feels more like an excuse for Disney to flex its financial muscles, to say, hey, look at what we can do. We can get all these brands to play nice together. We can get all these voice actresses back. We can make this the ultimate brand deal, basically. And that was a real turnoff, because it felt kind of cringeworthy whenever they do it. And like, the weird thing to me is that in this movie, when Ralph and Vanellope first enter the internet, I guess we might be getting into spoiler territory here, but again, I think so far I've only talked about the first 10 minutes of the movie, but spoilers are probably incoming. I don't think I'll really talk about the way the movie ends, but so don't necessarily worry about that, though I don't promise anything. If I start talking about the end of the movie, I will cut in a genuine spoiler warning. We'll say right around here somewhere. Anyway, I think it's kind of weird that, in the intro where Ralph and Vanellope first get into the internet, and they're looking down at the internet city, and you say, oh, look, there's Google, there's YouTube, there's, Facebook and Pinterest, and I don't remember if there's Twitch TV or whatever. Anyway, they show you YouTube, but then a whole, pivotal point that the movie orbits around is a fake website that functions like YouTube, but isn't YouTube. It's called, what is it, like Buzz Video or something, which, you'd think, okay, well, that's a BuzzFeed thing, because they also show the BuzzFeed logo in this movie. They also show like Kickstarter and everything else. Anyway, Buzz Video is also not related to BuzzFeed. They actually very specifically spell it Buzz with like 3 Z's, like it's some kind of weird super bootleg version of both BuzzFeed and YouTube. And like, that's the whole central point of the movie is having a video on Buzz Video that, they have to make a lot of money for something. And, they have to get lots of likes, and likes translate into money, so on and so forth. I actually thought it was like kind of realistic how many views translate into how much money. Like, that was actually like, oh yeah, 1.4 million views does not make you the kind of money that it used to back in the day. I say this as someone with a video on my YouTube channel, multiple videos, in fact, that are over 2 million views. Being a million views anymore isn't that special. But it's just, all the like brands, like every now and then there's a cute reference. Like, people pointed out in the trailer for Ralph Breaks the Internet, one of the people holding up a pop-up advertisement is like, hot single housewives want to meet you. And the picture on the pop-up banner advertisement is actually a screenshot of Aunt Cass from Big Hero 6, which is kind of like a weird sort of snake eating its own tail reference to the fact that there are like a weird contingent of people out there who think that Aunt Cass from Big Hero 6 is like super hot or whatever. I mean, like, whatever, to each their own. I'm not going to really complain about that. I just think that, that's like one of the very few funny references. Honestly, I found like the whole Disney princesses stuff that they were hyping up, I found that to be like super cringeworthy, because again, it's all about, Disney showing people, oh, look at what we've got. We've got all these brands. People go nuts for the Disney princesses. So we're going to put a scene in this movie full of Disney princesses, and people are going to go nuts for this movie. And it just feels really transparent. Like, that's one of those pet peeves I have, is when I know I'm being marketed to. When I know people are trying to predict me. when people are saying, hey, we know exactly how to sell you something and we're going to abuse that power. That is like turn off number one for me. And that's like over half this movie is, hey, look at all the stuff you recognize. I bet you love Pinterest. I bet you love Kickstarter. I bet you love YouTube and Google. And look at this little train with Gmail logos all over it. Isn't that cool? We have all these brands. We have all of the brands, every brand. We've got Star Wars. We've got Disney princesses. We've got Buzz Lightyear. We've hired Tim Allen to speak one line in this movie. We dug into the Disney archives to pull out archival audio of the mice from Cinderella. Here's Eeyore. Eeyore has one line in this movie. But once you get past that, once you get past all the cringy setup of, hey, we're in the internet now. Here's all the internet for us to gawk at and amaze at Disney spending $500 billion on advertising for essentially a 90-minute commercial for the internet. Once you get past the first, we'll say half an hour, 45 minutes, and the plot, like the actual emotional beats of the story start setting in, it actually becomes kind of a tolerable movie, I'd say. Not like the greatest movie ever made, but again, I don't think the original Wreck-It Ralph was what I would consider the greatest movie ever made. But I'll admit that the very ending sequence kind of got to me a little bit. There is somewhat of an emotional core in this movie. It doesn't really rear its head in like any significant way until maybe the last 15 minutes of the movie, but it's there. They do sort of build upon it in the early parts of the movie. It just kind of, gets buried under, we know what an internet meme is. We're over 40 years old. This is what someone who is probably pushing grandpa status thinks an internet meme is. It's all cat videos and pasting heads on goats and unboxing videos. That's a meme, right? An unboxing video? The Hot Pepper Challenge, everyone. You remember that? You remember Hot Pepper Gaming? That's only been a YouTube channel that's been shut down for 2.5 years. Now we have a guy that has celebrities eat hot sauce instead of hot peppers. Wow. I don't know. The internet's weird, man. And Ralph Breaks the Internet is weird. But again, I didn't hate it. I'd say that movie ends stronger than it starts. It's just, I found all the brand stuff to be really insufferable. All the references to internet culture was kind of insufferable. But there's still a movie in there somewhere. You just kind of have to dig for it a little bit. And there's other weird stuff, like spoilery stuff. There are scenes that were in the trailer that, this is a weird thing. I guess this is technically a spoiler. There are scenes, this is a spoiler for the whole movie, I guess. And, this counts as something that comes up in the post-credits. There are, I don't know if you can hear the super loud truck driving by. It's Tuesday, it's trash day, so you're probably going to hear all kinds of noise all of a sudden. Anyway, there is a scene after the credits roll, a post-credit scene, as it were, where it's a mom and a daughter sitting in a truck, in a minivan, and they're on the highway. And the little girl is talking about Ralph Breaks the Internet like she just saw it in the theater. And she goes, Mommy, something really confused me. There was a scene in the trailer that wasn't in the movie, and that makes me sad. And then they roll the scene that was in the trailer that wasn't in the movie as part of the movie in the post-credit sequence. That was really weird. Like, I've heard, part of the reason why this movie feels so light on story at first is because they tried really, 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 really hard not to sound dated about internet culture. And, credit to them, internet culture is a very fast-moving target, so I'm sure they tried their best to hit that target while it was still fresh and not seem like, again, it's too super dated, and they still seemed like super dated. I mean, to be fair, this movie came out, end of 2018. It is now middle of 2019. So, of course, those internet references are going to seem dated. And, for their part, they do try and target things that seem a little more universal, let's say. They joke again, unboxing videos. They joke about makeup tutorials, which is kind of like an eternal thing on YouTube. Obviously, I joked about the hot pepper stuff earlier. Nobody eats hot peppers on YouTube anymore, but they do hot sauce now. It's that kind of stuff. So, obviously that segment in the trailer that was not in the movie was probably something that had to be cut for time or cut for other reasons while they shuffled things around, to make room for whatever else they were doing while they were producing that movie. That's the way it goes. And it's just like such a weird movie. I don't think it's going to age that well at all. Maybe I'll be wrong. Maybe 15 years from now, we'll hear kids that were 8 years old at this point in their lives, and by then they'll be like 27, 28, and they'll be like, Ralph Breaks the Internet was a modern classic, and we need to get back to that again. And maybe I'll be proven wrong. That's kind of like how the cycle of this kind of stuff goes. I don't know if any of you have ever looked up like movies you thought were classics when you were a little kid, like, when you were 8 or 9 or 10 years old, and you thought, oh, that's my favorite movie. I grew up with that being my favorite movie. And then you look at the critic reviews as an adult, and you realize like most people didn't really like that movie when it came out at the time. Famously, this happened to The Goonies. That movie was kind of like a bomb for George Lucas when it came out originally. It was seen as like this movie for nobody. It was too adult for children, and it was too childish for adults. And, there is apparently a large subset of us that grew up with the Goonies, and the movie kind of grew up with us. And I say us as in, the kind of age group I'm in, because I'm not super in love with the Goonies. I mean, it's an okay movie. I don't love it like some people do, but a lot of people do. A lot of people genuinely love the Goonies because it's the kind of movie that kind of grew up with them. As they got older, they realized more things about the movie, were more grown up than they realized. And who knows? I mean, I don't think that's going to be the case with Ralph Breaks the Internet, but because it doesn't really have that kind of play to it like the Goonies did. But maybe kids will rewatch this movie 700 times and they'll realize like the secret genius to it all because they grew up with it, and to me I'm just some 35-year-old goon on the internet who just went internet references, get off my porch. But I don't think that's not actually the point I'm trying to make. I'm kind of selling myself short by saying that. Anyway, I don't know. And like there's weird like pseudo swearing in this movie. You almost get kind of like a sense that it's like a DreamWorks movie or something, like it's got a little bit of like a weird edge to it. Vanellope in particular seems to have, I guess I don't remember enough of the first movie, but she seems like she has more of a potty mouth in this movie. I mean, they do say, things. They talk about butts and farts in this movie, which is something, you don't usually hear in Disney movies, but also there's multiple points throughout the film where they start saying a word that's going to sound like a swear word, and then it's something else. Like they go, "Oh, sugar," kind of like Vinny on Giant Bomb does. And it's just, I mean, I guess that kind of makes sense with Vanellope's whole sugar rush game thing. I don't know. It's just weird, man. It's a weird movie that I didn't hate all the way, but I definitely didn't love all the way. But like, from here on out, skip ahead 3 to 5 minutes, because I'm going to spoil the ending of the movie here. There is a point towards the end, the part that got to me, it ends up like the whole theme of the movie is Ralph is kind of insecure about his friendship with Vanellope. Obviously he was the villain, kind of in the first movie, who was trying to prove that he was more than that he was kind of a big dumb lug, and he just wanted to be liked. And the first and kind of only person to like him was Vanellope, because they were both kind of like these different people. So Ralph spends like this whole movie kind of like holding on to their friendship for dear life. He doesn't want to let her go. And, she kind of grows and evolves in a way where, like the whole end of the movie is sort of like accepting that you have to let your friends grow. you can't hold them back and shackle them to you forever. You've got to let them go off to college or get a new job or move away. And that's kind of like what the whole point of the movie is. And it's like, yeah, them leaving is going to be a bummer and it's really going to hurt. And that's something Ralph literally says, it's really going to hurt a lot when they leave, but it's going to be better for them and it's going to be better for you if you let them go. And that actually, like, I can't necessarily say that rings 100% true for me, because, I've never really had a moment where I've been super clingy with friends like that. But just the idea of moving on to a new scenario without the friends you had, or the friends you used to have, is definitely a scenario that I can identify with. And that's the part of the movie that really kind of, it got to me in the heart muscles, let's say. So, that's the reason why I think Ralph Breaks the Internet is not a totally irredeemable movie. Because of that one sequence where it's like, oh, I get that feeling, and maybe everything will be okay, and that's good. I'm down for that. I've been playing Skyrim a lot lately. I don't know why. It just kind of popped into my head one day that I wanted to play Skyrim. And the problem with that is that original install of Skyrim is from like 2015. And I was playing it in 2017 and, all my mods from the Steam Workshop. And like I would mix mods, right? I would have some mods from the Skyrim Nexus and I would have some mods from the Steam Workshop because Skyrim has Steam Workshop support. I only have vanilla Skyrim, so, I don't have the DLCs or anything like that. So that's another one of those things where I have to like be really careful about, mod load orders and which versions of a mod I download and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But anyway, since then, obviously, I had to switch out motherboards. I fried my old motherboard with a power surge. I had to rebuild my whole system in April of last year. I had to reinstall Windows. Obviously, that is going to cause problems for an install of Skyrim I haven't touched in 2 years. But I decided to sit down and untangle it, and it took me like, what was it? It was like 2 days to figure out. I don't even remember. Maybe it was like a whole day, but it felt like a really long time. Just untangling all my Steam Workshop mods. I ended up uninstalling everything from the Steam Workshop that I could find and replacing it with alternatives from the Skyrim Nexus because that feels a little bit more modular. I guess Steam updated like the Workshop support for all games recently, and it kind of breaks Skyrim in a certain way. So, it all kind of turned into a big nightmare to deal with. Ooh, excuse me, I had lunch and I'm getting the hiccups a little bit. But it all kind of turned into a big nightmare to figure out. But eventually, I got everything unkinked and untangled, and I actually finally, literally, genuinely managed to boot back into Skyrim, and my save file from 2017 was gone. It took me a while to figure it out at first because, again, I hadn't touched Skyrim since, back when I was living in Colorado. So, it had been a good 2 years since I'd booted up the game. And I booted up my save and I figured, I didn't go into the save load dialog, so I didn't see the dates attached to the files or anything. I just hit continue and loaded up to wherever Skyrim thought I last left off, which put me in Riften, which is the city where the Thieves Guild is. And I thought, okay, this looks familiar. It's been a long time since I played Skyrim. I remember some of the things I did, but I don't remember a lot of the things I did. And one of the things I remember doing was in 2017, it was mostly like side quest stuff. I did like the whole Mages Guild line, I learned all my magic abilities, things like that. So I don't think, I'm thinking, okay, well, I didn't lose any story progress. Because I didn't do any story the last time I played Skyrim for a big chunk of time. And of course, throughout the course of playing the game, I realized all my progress from 2017 was gone. I was playing on save files from 2015. I ended up like digging through my screenshots on the Steam community, my Steam profile, as it were, and realized that when I was playing Skyrim in 2017, I was up over level 30. And here I was playing on save files from 2015 where I was like level 9, level 10, maybe 12. So, I'd lost like a lot of level progress. The screenshot in particular I'd found on my Steam profile, I had maxed out the entire archery skill tree. It was significant what I'd lost. Unfortunately, by the time I realized that, I'd almost caught back up to where I'd left off. I think by the time I realized, I'd lost all this progress on like the Mages Guild and everything, I'd basically finished the Thieves Guild quest at that time, which I'd never done before. And I was up around level 28, 29, maybe 31 or 32. So, I'd taken a completely different route to get there, but I was almost caught back up to where I left off. And thankfully, in terms of story progress, I did lose a little bit, but it was literally like one quest. This isn't a big spoiler or anything because I think it's pretty early on in the Skyrim story quest line. But eventually you get to talk to like a dragon called Parthenax, and he is this good guy dragon who is completely different from all the evil dragons you have to face in Skyrim. And that was like literally the only quest that was different between when I played in 2015 and when I played in 2017 was the quest to talk to Parthenax. That was the only thing I was missing. That was the only story progress I made back in 2017. So, again, I've taken a completely different route to get there, but I've basically caught up to where I was in 2017. And once I did that, once I realized I was caught back up almost to where I'd left off, I found my 2017 save files. Before I, wiped that old hard drive and reinstalled Windows, I have a USB enclosure for my hard drives. Essentially, I can take an internal hard drive, slot it into this USB enclosure, and turn it into an external hard drive. Any hard drive I have, as long as it is a platter hard drive, SATA, and I also have an IDE version for really old hard drives. And I realized before I wiped everything, I backed it all up to my Google Drive. I put it all in the cloud. I put, I very specifically looked for any place that game saves would be hiding. So, my user app folder, my documents folder, my games folder, anywhere that I thought save files would be hiding, I went through and I backed everything up. And at the time, when I reinstalled Windows and reset everything back up, what I thought I did was go through and pull all that stuff off my Google Drive and put it back onto the Windows Drive, but apparently I didn't. So, all my 2017 saves from Skyrim, I have them backed up in the cloud. I just don't need them anymore because, again, I caught back up to where I was. And, that's kind of a weird bummer, but at the same time, it's kind of like a weird alternate timeline where if I wanted to, I could jump back to a time where I'd finish the Mages Guild instead of the Thieves Guild. Playing Skyrim now, especially after Breath of the Wild, is super weird for how static the world feels. I think one of the things I think we all really sold Breath of the Wild short on at the time was just how much it makes you feel like part of a world. Not just in terms of in terms of everything, really. They give you specific puzzles where you roll boulders down the hill. And some of those puzzles, they give you like very specific instances where there will be like a golf hole at the bottom of a mountain. And they'll let you watch the rock roll all the way down the mountain like a good 200, 300, 500 feet away, 1,000 feet away, where, this boulder almost turns into a dot. But they let you see, like, the physics work that far away at that distance, and it feels incredible to see. They let you cut down almost any tree you can see. That's actually, like, a really good way to harvest apples from a tree, right? Is to hit it a couple times with like an axe, or I think even like a stick or, a sword or something. If there's like a whole harvest of apples or whatever you want to call it, a bushel of apples hanging on the tree, all you have to do is like hit it a couple times and all the apples will fall down and you can collect them all. You can cut any grass you can see. You can start fires that will just spread and spread and spread. You can set anything on fire, really. And it just really makes you feel connected to this world physically, like it's a real place that you can affect change in. And then you go back to Skyrim and all the trees are static. Fruit doesn't grow on trees. There's no such thing as a fruit tree in this game. No pine cones fall off the trees. You can't cut grass. If you set something on fire, it only stays burning for like a second or two. Fire doesn't really propagate. Fire doesn't really, it doesn't really act like fire. It's just kind of a fire effect. And it just feels kind of like a bummer. Like, you feel like really constricted and it feels like a set, I guess, like a movie set where nothing is real. And like I said, I think we really sold Breath of the Wild short when it first came out, because everyone was like, oh, this is just Nintendo's version of Skyrim. This is Nintendo's version of The Witcher. It's not that important. We've seen this game before. It's like, no, actually, in retrospect, going back to the games that we said Breath of the Wild was like, Breath of the Wild is definitely a better game because it is much more thoughtful, I guess you'd say. Again, like, I hate to keep harping on it, but you do feel that much more part of the world. Something happened in Skyrim while I was playing it. So obviously, like, the big hook of Skyrim is that dragons have returned to the land of Tamriel or Cyrodiil or wherever you are in this game. And it's the first time the dragons have been seen in hundreds of years. You have this big elder dragon called Gul'dan, I think his name is. Alduin. Alduin is his name. I don't know where I got Golden from. Alduin has come back and he's resurrecting all his old dragon buddies that were defeated, 1,000 years ago or whatever. Oh no, I lost my train of thought. I forgot where I was going with this. What was I even talking about? I pulled Gul'dan out of my brain and it plugged up all the other holes that information was flowing out of. Oh gosh, what was I thinking of? Oh, right. Okay, I remember what I was talking about now. So anyway, the whole big thing is that dragons have returned and it's your job to kind of roam the countryside. It's getting kind of late into the podcast here, folks, if you can't really tell. It's about 1 p.m. by now. So, I've taken, a good long time to record this podcast. Anyway, it is, you're roaming the countryside, killing dragons. And sometimes they're weak dragons, sometimes they're strong dragons, sometimes they are named elder dragon bosses. Anyway, one of the things, especially early on in the game, that it helps, because dragons are really hard to defeat on your own. You're just one guy, dragons can fly around. Dragons also have like this one-hit kill move, where like if they land on the ground and you're kind of in front of them, facing them face to face, they're just like big crocodiles. They can just chomp on you and that's it. You're dead. You're instantly dead. There's no coming back from that. So, usually you need help to take down a dragon. So one of the best strategies, especially early on in the game, is if a dragon catches sight of you and you get into a battle with one, go find help. Run to a village where there are guards, run anywhere where there's other people. Even if it's like a bandit camp, bandits are your enemy, but they'll focus on the dragon before they attack you. So, just run somewhere where there's a dragon and get other people to help you fight it. And sometimes that happens naturally. Sometimes you'll come across a dragon, just already in a fight with some villagers. It's particularly fun when you run into a dragon. Roaming the land of Skyrim are like these giants. They're like 15 feet tall. Usually they're kind of like these farmers that, tend to their flock of woolly mammoths. And the mammoths, give you mammoth cheese. It's a whole thing. And usually the best way to deal with a dragon is to lead a dragon to a giant, because giants are incredibly strong. They can one-shot you, the player, usually with 1 or 2 strikes from their hammer, especially, again, early on in the game. So usually your strategy is to give giants a wide berth, don't agitate them. They're normally peaceful, but they're pretty skittish. So, they won't come after you unless you give them a reason to come after you. But when it comes to having a dragon to fight, if you lead a dragon to some giants, the dragon's a jerk. The dragon will just attack anyone. And if they start attacking the giants, then usually by the time the dragon has the stupid idea to land on the ground, a giant will come lumbering over and whack at one with its giant club, and that'll be the end of the dragon. But, that's a scenario different from what I'm going to be talking about here. Sometimes you'll just run across a dragon, like in the middle of the road, let's say, fighting some guards, especially with the mods that I have turned on. I have like a Civil War mod, like in the background of the Skyrim plot, there's like this Civil War story where it's like Nords versus Vikings or something. I don't know. But usually it ends up with, faction A versus faction B, let's say. And with this Civil War mod, what it actually does is it kind of generates random battles in the overworld where you actually find these two factions, like, waging war. You'll hit like a group of like 20 or 30 dudes just fighting. And in this particular instance, I actually ran across a whole Civil War group fighting a dragon because, again, people will put aside their differeces if it means, killing the dragon. The dragon is priority number one to kill. So, you'll walk into a scenario where there's this dragon in the middle of the road, and there's like 30 people gathered around it, all hacking into it with their swords or their axes or, shooting it with lightning bolts or arrows or whatever. And what ended up happening in this particular scenario is that, I didn't want to be seen by the dragon. Usually the dragon will focus on the NPCs first, even if it knows you're around. Again, it's kind of that thing where, I don't know, there's like this weird thing where enemies of you will fight the dragon. The dragon is also an enemy of you, but it will fight the other enemies before it fights you. So, it's this thing where if there's bandits around, the dragon will fight the bandits will fight the dragon. So you can kind of focus on picking off the dragon at a distance. But you still, there are still instances where maybe the dragon will focus on you for a minute or two instead of fighting the bandits and things like that. So usually you want to try and sneak around a dragon is my ultimate point in all of this. You don't want to fight a dragon directly if you don't have the health to cover for it. And, with the combat system of Skyrim being what it is, it's the kind of combat system where either you completely obliterate your enemies in a single arrow, or they point a flamethrower at your face and you melt into ash in 0.3 seconds. That's just the kind of game that Skyrim is. So sneak around the dragon, don't bother it, let everyone else do the fighting for you. And as this was happening, I was sneaking up on this dragon battle with, this civil war that's going around it. Again, these, 10 or 20 soldiers from two different factions that are fighting it out against the dragon. All of a sudden, two soldiers just drop out of space directly in front of me. And I mean like out of space. I mean, they dropped from miles in the stratosphere straight down, and they landed at my feet. And what I ended up parsing out that happened, the dragon, I told you earlier, has this instant kill move. It's like a giant alligator. All it does is it chomps down on you. It's kind of like the T-Rex in Jurassic Park, actually. If you remember that guy in the porta potty, when the T-Rex kind of, grabs him and shakes him like a dog, that's what the dragons can do to you. And the dragons can also do this to NPCs. So what I figured ended up happening is the dragon was far enough away that the game was still calculating the fight it was in. Like it knew, okay, the dragon is 500 feet away, it's fighting all these soldiers, but it's far enough away that we're not going to calculate the entire battle. We're going to fudge the numbers because we know that there's a lot of entities in one place, but they're beyond the draw distance of what can be reasonably rendered in high detail. And what ended up happening is the dragon grabbed these two soldiers, shook them like the T-Rex, and then threw them away from the battle. And because they were far enough away, they kind of were culled out of existence for a little while, and were somehow in this state teleported up to the very top of the skybox. And then once I got close enough to the fight with the dragon and all these soldiers, the game said, okay, the player is close enough. We can render the position of these guards now. And what that appeared to be to me is that these guards dropped out of space. Because they were, two guards of the two factions that were at war, this civil war, that were also fighting the dragon. So it just had to be some kind of weird, draw distance culling thing. Where just, the fight was happening a certain way, these soldiers got blown away into the stratosphere, and the game, calculated a weird position where they just fell straight down out of the sky. And that's something that would probably never happen in Breath of the Wild. Breath of the Wild, as I said earlier, seems to very highly prioritize distant interactions. If you see an enemy on the horizon, across a lake or a river or something, that's just them. You can shoot an arrow across and hit them as long as they are visible. And Breath of the Wild very specifically sets up puzzles where you watch very distant interactions happen in real time without them, fading out, without them culling out of existence or anything like that. And I think that's, something it deserves more credit for. Because, that's something that wasn't happening in games of its type, older games. And I'm sure that happens to an even more extreme degree in The Witcher 3. I don't think distant NPCs exist past a certain point in The Witcher 3, probably at a much closer distance than even Skyrim, really. Because, that just strikes me as the kind of game that The Witcher 3 is. It doesn't really seem like the kind of game where, maybe, because I think I've never played The Witcher 3, but I think it's about kind of being almost kind of a monster hunter, tracking down griffins and things like that. I know that is definitely part of the wild hunt aspect of the game. I'm sure it keeps track of important entities like that, the griffin, whatever. But in terms of distant physics interactions, being able to cut down a tree and then come back 20 minutes later and that tree is still cut down, I don't think that's part of The Witcher 3, and that is definitely not a part of Skyrim. But it's something that Breath of the Wild does, and that's super impressive. So, this was me talking about going back to Skyrim, but really all it ended up being was me thinking, man, Breath of the Wild was a really good game. A really good game. It was more simple than a Skyrim in some ways, but it was also way more complex than a Skyrim in some ways. And I am definitely excited to see where Breath of the Wild 2 goes. I know I said I wasn't going to talk about E3 much, but, that was one of the things that Nintendo unveiled at their E3 Nintendo Direct. And that is probably one of the most exciting things for me right now, is figuring out what that game is going to be about. And unfortunately, I don't think we're going to find out probably for another 4 or 5 years, knowing Nintendo. But, who knows? Who knows indeed? I also ended up, I've said this before, I'm trying to save up for a Switch. I basically have enough saved up for a Switch right now, but I'm trying to wait and see, because rumors have been swirling for a really long time that are sort of gaining more and more and more credence over time, that Nintendo is planning a second hardware revision for the Switch. Sort of like a Nintendo DS Lite sort of thing. Or, a Game Boy Advance SP version of the Switch. And, rumors are swirling and swirling and swirling. So I'm trying to sit on my money and not buy a Switch right now, because I want to wait for the hardware revision, which should be sometime this year. The rumors were that it would launch in the summer. It is now summer. Nintendo hasn't even announced the thing yet. Now there's rumors it could be fall or even Christmas. It's going to be a real agonizing wait while I wait for this new Switch hardware revision, because it feels like if I caved and I bought a Switch right now, say for Super Mario Maker 2, which is another game I'm very excited for. If I caved and I bought that right now, and then in 2 or 3 or 4 months, Nintendo announced their hardware revision, I'd feel like an idiot. So what this is actually ending up leading to is that I kind of have money burning a hole in my pocket. I have a chunk of change sitting around that could buy a Nintendo Switch and a game or two, let's say. And instead, I keep dipping in and spending like $5 or $10 or $15 or $20 here and there on other things. And this month, I ended up spending like $20 on Xbox 360 games. Microsoft had a backwards compatibility sale. It was technically for the Xbox One, but if you buy digital games on the Xbox 360, they work on the Xbox 360. So I ended up spending, I think it was in the realm of $15 or $20 on Halo Reach, Split Second, and Virtua Fighter 2. And actually, just today, I also bought Sonic 3 and Sonic & Knuckles on Xbox Live Arcade, because I figure that will be relevant for the Sonic 3 video that I'm doing. And, that sale on Sonic 3 and Sonic & Knuckles on Xbox Live Arcade, I think that came to under $5, because I have Xbox Live Gold now. So, you start thinking 50% off a game that's $5, it ends up pretty cheap. But that is neither here nor there. What I'm trying to get at here is that I actually put like a good 4 hours or 4 or 5 hours really, into the Xbox 360 game Split Second. I think this was by Black Box Entertainment, right before they might have been bought out by Electronic Arts. It was for Disney. It was kind of their answer to Burnout, or I guess more closely related would be Mario Kart. The whole setup of the game is that you are taking place in a reality television show called Split Second. And for this reality game show called Split Second, the producers, in lore, let's say, the producers bought a whole island. They furnished it out to look like a real city. You have city streets, you have skyscrapers, you have an airport. All of it looks real and is functional. There's highways. But the explicit purpose of this reality show is that you race through all these city streets and then you destroy it all. This movie is like a big homage to Michael Bay movies, essentially. The whole thing is that, it's a normal racing game, but as you drive, you build up this power play meter. And when you use a power play, actually, I think they're called power moves, come to think of it. When you use a power move, you are essentially triggering something in the environment to explode or move around in such a way as to wreck the other cars. And the more you charge your power move meter, kind of the bigger and the more impressive destruction you can trigger. Like, a level 1 power play or power move or whatever it's called, might just explode a bus by the side of the road. And, that'll damage some cars, but it won't really take anyone out. But if you have a level 3 power move, that'll usually bring down an entire skyscraper on your opponents, or it'll cause a boat to become unmoored in the docks, and it'll slide down the ramp, and anyone that's in the way of that ramp, when it comes sliding down, they get wiped out. It's that kind of thing. And, it wasn't a super successful game in its era, and I was always interested in playing it because it's a very beautiful game. I think it came out in 2008 or 2009, and even today it looks gorgeous. It is, very visually impressive. If, Disney were to remaster this game so that it outputted at 1080p or even 4K, it would probably still look, just absolutely fantastic. It is a very impressive looking game, especially when it comes to nailing the Michael Bay aesthetic, as it were. I actually ended up, right before I bought and played Split Second, I ended up watching a Lindsay Ellis video about Michael Bay's Transformer movies. And, at some point in that video, she goes over the cliches of the Michael Bay movie. The 360-degree camera spin, the color palettes he uses a lot of the time. And something she really harps on a lot in that video is helicopters at dusk. And in Split Second, man, there are a lot of helicopters at dusk. Let me tell you a thing or two. It's really great, actually, because I think that video post-dates the Split Second video game. So you could tell, the developers of this game, Black Box or whoever they were, they knew their Michael Bay. They knew helicopters at sunset is Michael Bay, because this game is full of helicopters at sunset. But, like I was saying, it wasn't a very successful game. They never really made a Split Second 2 or anything like that. And on playing it, you kind of instantly realize why that is. The power move system is garbage, basically. Earlier, I related it to Mario Kart. And that's basically what this game boils down to. Instead of grabbing item boxes to, have specific weapons to shoot out against your opponents, all your weapons are kind of contextual to where you are in the environment. On turn 3, there will be a bus you might be able to explode. On turn 8, maybe there will be a crane that, if you trigger a power move, a power play, maybe this crane will scrape a piece of construction machinery across the track. That kind of stuff. And the problem with that is, a lot of it is only single use. You blow up a bus, that bus is already blown up. You can't blow it up again. Once you bring down the skyscraper, it's down. It's not coming down again. These are finite use items, as it were. And the other problem is, not only do you run out of power moves to use, you have absolutely no defense whatsoever against them. In like a game like Mario Kart, you have banana peels, you can hold shells out behind you. You've got all these defensive options. You have, some amount of defensive options against incoming weapons. There's no defense in Split Second. If you are driving and an opponent behind you decides to bring that skyscraper down on top of you, that's it. You just kind of have to take it. There is no defense against that. The skyscraper comes down, it wrecks your car, and you just have to hope that you can catch up before the race ends. And that is like maximum garbage, especially when you consider that, because the whole system of the game is being close enough to your rivals that you can trigger these power moves. Because again, you can't trigger them from infinite distance away. Your opponent has to be near the target, and you have to be near your opponent to trigger the explosion. So, if you're in first place, in order to keep things competitive, the cars rubber band to get up close to you. At the same time, the rubber banding is so aggressive that usually you're stuck in second place for most of the race. It gets so bad sometimes that, you'll be in second place, maybe it's like the first or second lap of 3, and you take out the car ahead of you. Now you were in second place, now you're in first place. The very instant you take out the car ahead of you and you're in first place, the car behind you suddenly and magically gets enough speed to pull ahead of you, and now you're back in second place. And it's the kind of thing where the car ahead of you stays at this very specific distance away from you. You can't ever get too far away from it. Maybe if you slow down too much, it'll get ahead of you. But you can never gain too much speed on it. It's always going to be a certain distance ahead of you. And the only way to fix that, the only way to actually win races after a certain point, is to take out the car ahead of you on the last turn of the last lap. There is no other way to win the race. And that also gets to be massively, massively frustrating, because it kind of leads to this scenario where all the CPU racers you're facing feel psychic. They're always going to be behind you. You can't ever get rid of them. They're always going to have the perfect power moves to use at exactly the right time to screw you over. You're never going to be able to catch the guy in first unless you take him out at the last possible second. And, after about 4 or 5 hours of playing that game, it just got to be really, really frustrating. And I was, maybe barely even a fourth of the way through that game. And, I kind of quit it and I haven't gone back to it yet because it just got real frustrating real fast. And not even the presentation can really save that game because, I told you about this whole setup about, it's this reality show on this island, that only really comes in during the tutorial. once you get past the tutorial, the game kind of turns you loose. And, every now and then you'll get like these, on the next episode of Split Second, you'll get these kind of bumpers where like one episode ends and the next one begins. But they are incredibly light. There's not much of a narrator. The whole reality show conceit doesn't really stick very hard. It's just kind of like a very bare scaffolding to hang these race events on. Honestly, my favorite part of Split Second is a special event type called Detonator. And it completely throws the whole race aspect out the window, and it turns it into a pure time trial, with the twist being all the power moves, the power plays, or whatever you want to call them, they're scripted so that they automatically trigger as you're racing through the track. So, it kind of becomes almost like a stuntman game at that point, where you're kind of just dodging these disasters left and right, trying not to wreck when, buildings come down on top of you, when boats get unmoored from their docks or whatever, when, an airport control tower comes crashing down and a rogue airplane crashes into the runway and you have to avoid the wreckage. It feels absolutely incredible when you do a detonator event and you survive one of those and, get under the target time and everything like that. It is a thrill ride. They could have built a whole game on that, but they didn't. They built this crummy racing game as the primary event, and, that's not really very much fun. I own the Stuntman games. I know that if I want more of that, it exists. But the Stuntman games feel a little too scripted for me. And that's kind of the thing that I liked about the split-second Detonator events, is that they didn't feel so scripted. It was just kind of a normal racetrack. And, maybe I could take this turn tighter than the game wanted me to. It just felt like a little bit more freedom than you get in a typical Stuntman game, where it's kind of like, hit your marks exactly right every single time. Don't deviate even a little bit, otherwise the movie's going to suffer, that kind of stuff. I finished Super Mario Run, the mobile game. I don't own Super Mario Run. I've thought about buying it a few times here and there. Super Mario Run is normally, I think, $9.99, and I have like $6 in my Google account, my Google Store credit. So, if I wanted to buy Super Mario Run, it would only be like $3. That's not a big deal. But instead, what I mean by finishing Super Mario Run, they have a mode in there called Remix 10. I think it was added sometime last year or maybe the year before. And the whole goal is that, Super Mario Run kind of underperformed for Nintendo. Not a lot of people wanted to spend $9.99 on what is essentially a single-player mobile Mario game. It actually has, levels, hand design levels that, fit into the new Super Mario Brothers themes. It has like boss fights and stuff like that. It is like a proper Mario game where you only have the jump button as an input. Levels are a good, 2-3 minutes long in the single player mode. But they introduced this thing called Remix 10 that kind of breaks everything up into much smaller bite-sized chunks. So instead of having like a 2-minute, normal Mario Brother level, you play like this tiny 10-second chunk. And it kind of strings these 10-second chunks together into kind of like a playlist. And that's what Remix 10 is. You go through a chunk of like 5 different chunks, 5 different 10-second chunks of different levels. And your goal is to collect all the rainbow coins or whatever, because rainbow coins will get you unlocks for your kingdom builder or whatever. But the ultimate goal in all of this is that once you reach Remix 10 World 30, at the very, very, very end of World 30, you unlock the ability to play as Princess Daisy. And normally, you're supposed to pay for Super Mario Run to do this. If you don't pay for Super Mario Run, they put timers on everything. So, you might finish a chunk of 5 levels or whatever it is, and it'll say, okay, you can't play anymore until 2 hours from now, unless you pay us 5 Toad Rally tickets. And as it turns out, 5 Toad Rally tickets isn't really a lot to spend. By the time I reached the very end, World 30 of Remix 10, I had like 75 Toad Rally tickets. it gets real easy to, save those buddies up. Because, every time you start Super Mario Run, you have a chance of getting 6 Toad Rally tickets. It's completely random, of course. You don't always get 6 Toad Rally tickets. But if you're running into a scenario where, let's say, your Remix 10 timer says you can't play for another 24 hours, well, the item box in your kingdom resets every 2 hours, as does the bonus minigame where you get even more Toad Rally tickets. So, let's say in a single day, you could end up with something like 24 Toad Rally tickets if you got really lucky. So, it's no big deal to just save up massive amounts of Toad Rally tickets to spend in Remix 10. And, Remix 10 is pretty fun for what it's worth. It's actually probably the proper way that Super Mario Run should have been from the beginning. Again, it's all these bite-sized little chunks. It's kind of almost semi-randomized, almost kind of like Spelunky is in a sense where, you hit familiar chunks of levels, but they've been remixed up a little bit. And, there's usually, for one specific chunk of a level, there's usually 5 different layouts that chunk can have of varying, kinds of difficulty. So, it ends up being quite a bit of variety, quite a bit of gameplay, nice bite-sized chunks, and, generally pretty challenging, but not really very punishing, let's say. Normally losing a life in Remix 10 only means that you get less rewards after you finish that set of levels. And, it was fun enough, but, I got to the end of World 30, I unlocked Princess Daisy, and now it's kind of like, oh, well, I don't have any reason to play Remix 10 anymore. I can't play as Princess Daisy in Remix 10 as far as I'm aware. She's mainly for the single player, and since I didn't pay for the single player, there's really no reason for me to have Princess Daisy. And obviously, Remix 10 continues on after you rescue Princess Daisy. You just end up getting more and more generic rewards after that. And, I'll probably go back to Remix 10 as it were, but, I've been really, ramping up how much I play Remix 10 over the last 3 or 4 months, kind of focusing really hard on trying to unlock Princess Daisy. And now that I've unlocked her, it's kind of just like, okay, well, I guess I'll never play Super Mario Run ever again. So, that's been a valuable way for me to spend my time as of late. And if you've noticed that I haven't actually talked about playing A Link Between Worlds in a couple of months, it's mainly because I've been spending, most of my portable game playing time playing Super Mario Run, a Remix 10 instead of A Link Between Worlds. But that's also because I'm kind of stuck in A Link Between Worlds. I can kind of see why Breath of the Wild did it the way it did, where, it gives you all of your items up front, and then all the shrines incorporate those items into their puzzles. Because A Link Between Worlds doesn't do that. Instead, A Link Between Worlds, forces you to pay rental fees for all your items so that, maybe you'll have some items and not others. And, maybe if you die, you'll lose all your items. You have to re-rent them again at higher prices. It's this kind of weird systems nightmare in A Link Between Worlds that was, I'm sure, very revolutionary at the time. It felt very freeing versus Link to the Past or whatever. But post Breath of the Wild, again, that game did some very smart things that I don't think we gave it credit for at the time. So it's led to this situation where, I've kind of been grinding out items in A Link Between Worlds because I don't think this is a huge spoiler, but after a certain point in the game, instead of renting all your items from the shop, you actually get an option to buy them permanently. So, while trying to figure out where to go next, I've been slowly, one by one, buying all the items from the store so that I own them permanently, so that if I die, I don't lose the items I've rented and have to re-rent them at higher prices. And I think when I left off in A Link Between Worlds, I'd almost bought everything, and I've also probably upgraded all of the items in my inventory to their level 2 versions. Probably about half the items in my inventory, I've done that too. So, it's been this weird thing in A Link Between Worlds where I've just been wandering around a lot, doing incidental side quest stuff, not really focusing on the main quest because I kind of feel like I'm not prepared for most of the dungeons because a lot of the dungeons seem to require one specific item that the game is holding back from me and I don't know where to find it. There is one particular dungeon in the place I'm at that seems like I could tackle right now because if you don't know, the last place I left off in A Link Between Worlds, I just got access to the Dark World. And, they say, okay, there's 5 or 6 dungeons in the Dark World that you can tackle in any order, but most of them seem to be locked and I don't have the item required to get in. Maybe I'm just not being creative enough with my item use, but it really does seem like I'm missing something. So, I've just been kind of discovering the entrances to dungeons, not being able to get in there, and then kind of wandering away to find something else, which usually ends up turning into another dungeon entrance that I can't enter. And there's one dungeon I know I can get into. I probably did about half of it. And again, it seemed like maybe I didn't have all the tools I needed to finish that dungeon because it seemed a little beyond some of the abilities I had. So I ended up actually going probably like halfway through that dungeon, solving half of the puzzles that are in there and deciding maybe I don't have all the items for this that I need. And then I backed out and I've been wandering the world map looking for other dungeons since then. And it's one of those things where it's like, A Link Between Worlds is this very freeing game. You can do anything in any order and it doesn't matter. And it's really cool the way it does that. And I really appreciate that about it, that it's not holding my hand or anything like that. Like I said, 2 podcasts ago when I was giving it this glowing, raving review or whatever. But at the same time, when you get lost in that game, you feel real lost, like really, really lost. And, now that I don't have Super Mario Run to distract from it, I'm thinking, maybe I should actually glance at a FAQ, just to kind of get my bearings, because it's been a while since I've played, figure out, there's probably that one dungeon I found in the lake with the lava and whatever. That's probably a dungeon I can finish. I just need to go back inside and actually finish it, because I probably do have all the items I need for that. I was talking with a friend about A Link Between Worlds a couple weeks ago, and it does sound like I have almost every item in the game. There's only maybe 3 or 4 that I'm missing, and the game kind of doles them out to you much later after the point I'm at. So again, maybe I should glance at a FAQ, kind of get a refresher of where I need to go, verify that the one dungeon I found is the next one, like the only next one that I can do, and then we'll see what's up from there. But that's just been my feelings on A Link Between Worlds. It is a very freeing game, but is a game that, if you do get lost, heaven help you, I guess. You're going to get overwhelmed kind of like I did. And then finally here on this list, the only super notable thing I've played since the last podcast would be Grand Theft Auto 5. I've been keeping track of this game on PC and everything for a really long time. Specifically on PC because I wanted to have the ability to mod the game. Modding Grand Theft Auto San Andreas and GTA 3 were all terrific amounts of fun for me back in the day, so I very specifically wanted the PC version of GTA 5 just for the mod support. But, until I start dabbling in that kind of stuff, I've just been kind of poking at the single player, not really playing super seriously. I'm not rushing through the story or anything like that. I wasn't actually a super big fan of this game's storyline when it came out. And, it's kind of all coming back to me, all the problems this game has, especially in the face of, the PC version, the HD consoles version, PS4 and Xbox One. It was kind of remastered a little bit. They added enhanced effects. There's all these fancy grass effects now and everything. They added new wildlife, new side missions where you go hunting and all this other wild and wacky stuff. There's a whole mission about tracking down Bigfoot now or whatever. I don't know. And the big thing is they added a first person mode. And I figured, okay, For this entire playthrough, I will play Grand Theft Auto 5 exclusively in first-person mode. And what it's really made me realize is just how much Rockstar spent on crafting the world of GTA 5 to feel like a real, unique, lived-in place. Just in terms of unique textures, unique storefronts. There are places, dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of places in Grand Theft Auto 5 that are 100% uniquely made. They are not repeated textures. They are not repeated storefronts. There is only one of those in the world, period. And it is just these crummy little corner bodega markets, graffiti on walls, posters, advertising lost pets and things like that. All this readable, detailed textures, and just seeing all of that up close in first person mode. It is a trip and a half how much money Rockstar spent on this game. And alternatively, how little actual gameplay is in it. I don't want to belittle it too much, because there is, a good 30-hour game in Grand Theft Auto 5. It is not a small game by any stretch of the imagination. But there are so many locations in this game that appear fully detailed that are never used for anything. There is a dog track or a horse racing track that never gets used in the single player. There's a casino that never gets used in the single player. There are hospitals with detailed interiors that never get used in the single player. It is just absolutely insane the amount of detail this world has that is functionally worthless. I know some of this stuff eventually got used for Grand Theft Auto Online. Something one of my friends has been really big into lately is this streaming group, I guess you'd call them, called No Pixel. No Pixel GTA RP, or Grand Theft Auto Roleplay. Particularly this lady that runs a hospital called, well, she doesn't run the hospital, she's a receptionist there, but she's called Brenda Pancake. And, I've watched a few of the streams that she's run. It's by a Twitch streamer called Ashlyn. And it is the weirdest parts of The Office meets a Tim and Eric sketch, kind of. It is the most bizarre thing I've maybe ever watched. And it really sucks you in once you really sit down and pay attention to it all. A lot of the people involved in that roleplay group are absolutely hilarious. They embrace the insanity of Grand Theft Auto. It is a very fun thing to watch, or at least it was. I haven't heard from it in a while, but like I said, this Brenda Pancake lady is a receptionist at a hospital. That's how I know that this hospital has a fully detailed interior, because in Grand Theft Auto Online, you can enter this hospital. The doors open. But in single player, those doors are locked. You can't ever get inside, even though you can look through the windows and you can see, all the hospital beds and the receptionist table and the door that leads to the rooftop and, everything like that. None of that is accessible in single player. It's only accessible in Grand Theft Auto Online. And that in itself is a little bit infuriating to me, because I don't want to play Grand Theft Auto Online, especially on PC, where I hear that hacking is super, super, super rampant. You will suddenly have millions of dollars implanted into your bank account only to have them instantly removed and then put back a second later. You'll be sniped from 500 feet away, from someone who logically couldn't see you, aimbots and just all kinds of crazy stuff. People who get permanently turned into toilets, and then they can't move anymore because they're just a toilet sitting in the middle of the street. Hacking in Grand Theft Auto Online is just, apparently a huge problem that Rockstar has no way to deal with, or has no intention of dealing with. So, I don't want to play on Grand Theft Auto Online, at least not on the PC. Maybe if I had a PS4 copy, but I can't mod the PS4 copy. So, it's this kind of double-edged sword kind of thing. Do I want to play Grand Theft Auto Online, or do I want to play a modded version of the single player of GTA 5? And I think I'd rather play a modded single player version of GTA 5. But it's so weird how much, just, you can feel how much money they spent on this game, and it almost feels scary after a certain point. Just, thinking that they probably had like a whole team of people who just wrote poster text. Because there'll be like tack boards in the game where people advertise, join my band. Ugly drummer needed to make lead guitarist look better. That'll be on a poster board somewhere. And, they have like 30, 40, 50 of these kind of notes that they put on these things. And you have to think, there was a whole, 2 or 3 writers that probably wrote all of those notes, some of which are written by hand, and all of them are high enough resolution that you can read them when you're in the first-person camera. Just crazy things like that, right? There was a whole team that was responsible. There's a mission in this game. I mentioned it in my Grand Theft Auto 5 review back when that game came out on the Xbox 360. There's a whole mission in that game where you have this special mopping mechanic, because during one of the heists in the game, you play as a janitor. And at one point, you kill a guy or something, I don't remember, and, it leaves a bunch of blood on the floor. And it's your job as this janitor to, you come equipped with a mop, you dunk it in your bucket, and you have to swab up the blood, to kind of erase it from the floor. And, someone had to program all of that. They had to program the mopping animations. They had to program, the mop head physics, because those are very realistic. They had to get a guy to have, mopping sounds, the sloshing of the bucket, the wet slap as the mop hits the linoleum. They had to have a special shader guy code a shader to where when you swab the mop across the floor, it realistically erases the blood from the floor. It's not pre-programmed or anything like that. Everywhere the mop head touches is where it erases the blood decal from the floor, realistically in real time. No tricks, no nothing. It's actually mopping. And you only ever do that one time in the entire game. There is no other place anywhere ever where you ever mop ever again. They programmed all of these systems, the physics for the mop head, the animations for mopping, the shader system to erase the blood from the floor. They, 24 elements of this one 5-minute sequence that never comes up ever again. It is like Rockstar is showing off how much money they can spend on a game. And it is wild and weird. And now that I'm playing Grand Theft Auto 5 in first person, not only am I feeling all of this again, but seeing the HD remaster with all these brand new grass effects and all these, improved texture detail and things like that, it just feels like 10 times worse. Like, here are things nobody would ever look at in their entire lives, ever. No one could ever see these textures before. And there are hundreds or even thousands of textures that are extremely detailed. Someone meticulously went through and wrote out all of this text so that it made sense. There are newspapers in the game. I was talking about this the other day. In most video games, if you have a newspaper texture, you have the one newspaper texture. It's the same headline on every newspaper you ever see in the entire game. This is actually something that comes up in Grand Theft Auto 3, where you have newspapers that blow around on the streets, just as like particle effects or whatever. And it's this newspaper about how Elvis is alive, and that is the one newspaper texture in that entire game. Grand Theft Auto 5 has at least 7 different newspaper textures, and each of them has a unique headline. Each of them has a unique picture on the front page. Some of them have like advertisements inside the newspaper itself. The textures are almost detailed enough where you could actually read the newspaper articles themselves. They're just filled out with, lorem ipsum filler text or whatever. But, the textures are high resolution enough that if they had someone actually write out articles for all these newspapers, you could sit there and read them. And again, there's 7 or 8 of these unique newspaper textures. And it's just insane to think that they went through that trouble. There are a dozen magazines in this game. All of them have unique covers. All of them have readable text. All of them are high resolution enough that they look like magazines. And again, there's at least 12 of those. There's beauty magazines, gaming magazines, film, TV, car magazines, girly magazines. There's a dozen candy bar brands, there's chips, there's soft drinks. It is just, hey, let's spend $1 billion and develop the most detailed video game to ever exist. And, it's one of those things where you look at it and you're kind of in awe, but at the same time, you're kind of in fear of it. It's almost like looking at the face of God or something, It's just like, it's this incomprehensible thing where it's like, why anything, None of this makes the video game better. It doesn't play any better. They could have, cut all these assets in half, cut down on all the newspaper textures, magazine textures, candy bars, posters in break rooms of tech companies. They could have cut all of that stuff in half. Nobody would have noticed it was gone, for one thing, and they could have poured all that money into having more single-player missions in the game, right? There could have been more side activities. They could have written a better and more satisfying ending to the single-player campaign. They could have saved a lot of money making the world just 1% less interesting to look at and funneled that into actually making the game itself play better. And they didn't do that. Grand Theft Auto 5 gets to be a very disappointing game by the end of that story. And it is all so weird. What a weird thing. What a weird company. I don't know, man. Rockstar, Rockstar's weird. And who even knows what Grand Theft Auto 6 is going to feel like or look like or play like? I have this fear deep inside my brain that it's going to be about getting Donald Trump elected. That's going to be their big hook. Is that, one of the people you play as is a campaign advisor for this total jerk that wants to be president. And it's your job as the dishonest Grand Theft Auto man to help him get elected. That sounds, that's my speculation. That's nothing confirmed. But that just sounds like a nightmare to me. And it sounds like the kind of nightmare they might do. But, I'm probably going to be, 100% off base. Rockstar's whole thing is, I was a made man in the illegal underground crime world, and then I got out, and now they're dragging me back in again. That was Grand Theft Auto 1. Well, in the Grand Theft Autos with story, that was Grand Theft Auto 3, Vice City, San Andreas, 4, 5, Red Dead 1, Red Dead 2. That's kind of their story. But man, what a weird thing. Anyway, that's the end of the podcast. I've talked far too long about a great many things, and I hope you enjoyed it. I hope if you're a Patreon donor, you submit questions at the designated email address. A link to the post will be in the podcast show notes. Let me know about the suggested changes I've been making to my Patreon. Requesting videos, requesting streams, what you think those should be priced at, what you've seen other Patreons price that at, whether or not you think that would be a good fit for me. After all, I am doing this for you guys. Let me know how you think that should interact with game development stuff. Because obviously, I still think about Overbite every single day. I almost kind of fall asleep thinking about it most nights. I have a 19-page design document I need to do something with. I can't just keep doing YouTube videos forever. There's this thought that, once I buy this Nintendo Switch, maybe I can cut back on the YouTube videos because I won't have any major goals to save up for anymore. But I should buy a new hard drive, a new C drive, because I'm running out of space on my C drive. That's only a 500 gigabyte hard drive. Windows only lives on a 100 gigabyte partition. So, I need probably at least a 1 terabyte drive for that, which, will probably be about $60. I could buy that right now if I wanted. I also need to think about, buying that memory card for my very nice camera. See if that fixes the overheating issues I've been experiencing ever since I got that last year. What was that? Last August or whatever. I've been thinking about a boom arm for this microphone so that I could stream more easily. That's something I could save up for. Maybe I could buy a webcam because, again, that super nice camera, it looks beautiful. It shoots like gorgeous video, but it only shoots 30 minutes at a time. So, if I'm ever going to do more dare to scare videos that are, hours and hours and hours long, having a webcam solution, a pretty normal webcam would benefit from that. Again, that's another $70. I almost bought a Mod Mic 5 a few months ago, which would have been, $60 or $70, which is, kind of like a modular headset microphone that would snap onto my existing pair of headphones. That would have made it easier for me to stream as well. There are a lot of options out there that I could save money up for, theoretically. So, the Patreon is still useful to me. Making money is obviously still useful to me. Saving money is very useful to me. So I need to hear what you guys want from me because you're my patrons and, you decide my future. So let me know what you think about the proposed changes, the proposed prices, and we'll sort that out when we get there. See you guys next month for my birthday, really. Bye!